Throne of the North. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176 Forced into War. There are 2 intersecting rivers and more than a dozen streams of different sizes in Baron Solis's territory. The cultivated fields are distributed between these water systems. As the ice and snow melt, the river water irrigates the surrounding areas, and the spring plowing period has begun here. In the north, the time for spring plowing is not fixed on a certain day every year. When the weather is not so cold, the serfs need to seize the time to plant the seeds and then take care of them day and night. For more than 99% of the serfs in the territory, there is no reward for planting well, but there will be severe punishment for planting poorly. When Viscount Hug learned that Ryan's army had entered Baron Solis's territory, he successfully captured the Greystone Castle, which was not defended by many people. In this regard, the nobles in the distance were also alarmed. This can be regarded as the biggest fruit of the war since the start of the war this year. Leon, that frozen baron is not as powerful as we thought. He lost Greystone Castle in less than 2 days, with undefeated nobles, the most powerful military strategist in the north. I think it's just a boast from those rubbish in Zero Crossing County. What kind of person is that? He can't even defend Greystone Castle. Obviously, after Greystone Castle was occupied by Viscount Hogg, some nobles in Longshan County began to panic, as this would allow Viscount Hogg's cavalry to easily appear in their territory. And their own army is now following the army of Earl Solin's family and fighting against the army of Thundercloud County. But another day passed, and new news came, shocking all the nobles. Baron Ryan has recaptured Greystone Castle again. It seems that this frozen baron is not completely useless. His achievements have not been exaggerated too much. He still has some skills. However, a new day Greystone Castle was lost again, and Viscount Hogg occupied it again. On the 3rd day, Ryan recaptured Greystone Castle again. On the 4th day, Greystone Castle continued to change hands. At this time, even the dumbest nobles reacted. What happened? The truth. The answer? Ryan, who was in the territory of Baron Solis, looked at Brand and thousands of soldiers who ran back and nodded. The truth is that Viscount Hogg did not have any infantry behind him. As long as Ryan sent troops over, Viscount Hogg would leave on his own. Similarly, Ryan would take his troops back the next day because there was no food. The soldiers of the nobles of Yinchuan County are fighting against the nobles of Tishan County. In addition to his own cavalry, Viscount Hogg only brought more than 2,000 soldiers and his elite cavalry to help Earl Weiss. That is to say, Earl Weiss used the army of Lion County plus Viscount Hogg's more than 3,000 soldiers to fight against 2 counties and us. No matter how many people there are in the alien world he occupied, the number of troops is not enough. Part of it was assigned to Bifang County to deal with the most terrifying Earl Winter, and part of it was to fight against the army of Longshan County. In terms of numbers, Earl Weiss was at a disadvantage no matter where, so, in addition to the cavalry, Viscount Hogg could not even control the more than 2,000 infantry he brought, and he had to use them to help Earl Weiss fight against the armies of many nobles in Longshan County on the front battlefield. Their purpose is the same as ours, which is to prevent the opponent's army from appearing on the front battlefield. After Ryan finished speaking, Baron Enzo, who had been shocked for several days, finally couldn't help it. You knew that Viscount Hogg was just trying to contain us. No. Ryan shook his head. What could he say? Did Viscount Hogg leave without defending the Greystone Castle? Did Viscount Hogg not want too many deaths in his army? Did Viscount Hogg just follow Earl Weiss to earn a lot of wealth to train his own extraordinary army? Yes, a new year, a new war, and the goals of each noble for the war are different. First of all, Ryan, the purpose of this war is just to get a windfall from the loser to ease the financial pressure in his territory. Secondly, Viscount Hogg's Yinchuan County. In last year's war, the nobles of Yinchuan County did not want to continue the war. They also suffered a lot of losses in the war at the end of the year. The most important thing is that the blizzard made almost all the nobles lose their income. In this year's war, the nobles of Yinchuan County only want to make a fortune from Tishan County to make up for their losses in the blizzard. So only more than 3,000 troops belonging to Viscount Hogg came to the front battlefield here to help Earl Weiss. What he wants is not something that can be taken from Tishan County. Earl Solin and Earl Winter? The two of them are the biggest beneficiaries of the North Wind province. Their current war is to resist and protect their Clayton interests from being divided. The most critical one is Earl Weiss. Earl Weiss's purpose is different from that of all the nobles. He wants to occupy the entire North Wind province and become the ruler here. So among so many nobles, only Earl Weiss will start a war at all costs, which led to Earl Winter and Earl Solon being forced to accept this massive war. Yes, the cost. This is the most important issue. The high cost of the war led to the nobles in Longshan County betraying Earl Solon and passing the traces of the grain transport team to Viscount Hogg. Similarly, the high cost will also make Viscount Hogg and Baron Ryan form their own tacit understanding. Of course, they hope that the great nobles on their side will win the war. For example, if Earl Weiss wins, Viscount Hogg must be the noble who gains the most besides Earl Weiss. Similarly, if Earl Winter and Earl Solon win, Ryan can also reap a large sum of wealth from Thundercloud County as a reinforcement from the expedition. However, this does not mean that they would like the war to spread over their heads. Viscount Hogg absolutely does not want his knights and squires, the future extraordinary legion, to die, and so does Ryan. In this case, tacit understanding is very important. So Viscount Hogg will not let his cavalry appear behind Earl Solon's army. No matter how good the opportunity is, his cavalry, which is less than 1,000 people, will definitely suffer heavy losses. How much wealth will be gained after the war to make up for it? Of course, if there is a good opportunity, both sides will not let it go. From beginning to end, the war that started in the North Wind province this year was only the ambition of Earl Weiss, and everyone else was passively implicated. The orcs went south, the land war brought about by the Lord system, the blizzard, all these disasters broke out in just 12 months. Any one of them would make the nobles unwilling to start a war afterwards. Let alone all three together. If there is no other means, Earl Weiss will definitely fail. This is Ryan's judgment. Chapter 177 The Changing War. Redwing Plain. Legend has it that there were groups of pterosaurs who regarded this place as their home. Whenever it was cold in winter, they would fly from the distant north wind to the Redwing Plain in the south to lay eggs. Of course, this was a legend before the Pan-Plain War of the Gods. Redwing Plain was not red, but this year, with the arrival of the army of Thundercloud County and the battle with the army of Northwind County, the land here was gradually stained red with blood. Viscount Hogg came here majestically and met Count Weiss in the big tent. "My lord, you are looking for me? You know that the distance from Longshan County to here is not short, Viscount Hogg. It shouldn't be a big deal for you to delay for a few days. Anyway, after you go back, with your ability, Viscount Hogg, you can easily occupy Greystone Castle." Count Weiss's eyes were a little cold, but Viscount Hogg's voice was also unfriendly. He was also a nobleman, but his rank was a little lower, which did not mean that he was Count Weiss's retainer or slave. "My lord Earl, at your request, I stopped the army of Lingdu County from attacking you from behind, so as to avoid the annihilation of the army in Longshan County. I have done my task, but my lord Earl still seems dissatisfied with it. If you think I am slacking off in the war, I will withdraw from the war with my soldiers. My territory has also entered the spring plowing period. Without these 3,000 people, the pressure this year is already very high. The nobles in Yinchuan County are already somewhat dissatisfied with me. I am still very curious about how you, my lord Earl, persuaded the nobles in Lian County to support you in starting this war. Indeed, this is not only the answer that Viscount Hogg is curious about, but other nobles in Bifang Province are also very curious. For now, only the nobles in Lian County have not voiced opposition to the war. The other counties are almost all complaining and unwilling to start the war. Humph, Viscount Hogg's eyes were cold, and he wanted to say something cruel, but he didn't say it. After a moment, he could only look at Viscount Hogg and say, "Viscount Hogg, you have been in the Golden Knight for a long time, right? To become a Sky Knight, you need a lot of resources. Have you ever thought that if we lose this war, you will get nothing?" After saying that, without waiting for Viscount Hogg to react, Count Weiss waved his hand, and a soldier brought in a 3-meter-long metal box. As the box was opened, a burst of cold air gushed out, and then 10 potions and 3 frozen objects were placed in front of the two. A complete set of Night Potion Centaur Sword, once known as the most perfect night potion in the Andorra Kingdom, was created by the legendary wizard Wild. There are less than 10 copies stored in the entire Andorra Kingdom's royal room. Weiss picked up the frozen object, which was a crystal, but the inside of the crystal seemed to be sealed with a golden ocean. The alchemical creation Gold Coast is the most valuable blood medium. It is said to be able to simulate the waves of the sea, help the Golden Knights temper their blood and physique, and give birth to the sky fighting spirit comparable to the tide. After saying that, he picked up the second frozen object, which was a bottle forged with gems. It contains 10,000 kilograms of giant blood. Viscount Hogg could also recognize the third frozen object. It was a specialty of the church, the morning holy water. There was only one drop, but it could pull a person back from the state of near death. Count Weiss looked at Viscount Hogg. Do you think these things can help you break through to the Sky Knight? You should know that under the sky and above the sky are two completely different worlds. If you want to lead an extraordinary army, you will definitely not be able to do it without the power of the Sky Knight. If you win this war, you will get these things. If you lose the war, you will get nothing. The soldier sealed the metal box and moved it away, but Viscount Hogg seemed to have difficulty taking his eyes off it. The value of these things was at least 300,000 if not 500,000. Because each of them was what the Golden Knight dreamed of. What do you want me to do? Without infantry, I can't defeat Baron Ryan. The army he brought is all the elite of Lingdu County. Then bring all your soldiers to me. Let's deal with that old guy from the Soren family first. Count Weiss's eyes revealed hatred. If the Soren family was willing to stand on his side, there would be no such trouble now. Everything would have been ended last year. Obviously not a pure imperial man. Why are you loyal to the Empire? The army assembled in Longshan County has more than 30,000 people, and there are 3,000 dragon blood warriors. The combat effectiveness of those extraordinary soldiers is not even comparable to that of the barbarians under your command, right? Viscount Hogg said. As far as he knew, with his own more than 2,000 infantry, the number of troops arranged by Count Weiss in Longshan County was only 20,000. The reason why the advantage in the war is still there now is purely because Count Weiss ordered his soldiers to rush forward without regard for their lives, and fiercely suppress the momentum of those armies. He didn't know what Count Weiss used to win the war. I have my own way. The gap between Count Weiss and Viscount Hogg made him no longer completely trust the Viscount of Yinchuan County. On the other hand, Ryan also received a letter from Count Solon at about the same time. It expressed regret for the burning of food, and also explained to Ryan that Baron Solis and other nobles did not have more food to supply the army. Finally, it invited Ryan to lead the army to the main battlefield to expel Count Weiss there. Ryan wanted to pretend that he didn't see it, but after waiting for 2 days without hearing from Viscount Hogg, he knew that he had to react. He no longer had Viscount Hogg as an enemy in front of him. As one of the coalition forces of the Northwind province, he could not continue to stay in the territory of Solis. After all, he still had to mix in the circle in the future. What's more, now Viscount Hogg has also gone to the front line, and if he doesn't go, it will be unprofitable. Tell Lord Count Solon that we will arrive at the front soon. Ryan didn't know why both sides made such a decision. The war that could have lasted for several months unexpectedly wanted to be resolved through a decisive battle. If he had to guess, he could only think of one answer, and that was food. No matter which noble had it, after the snowstorm, no one had any more food. Count Weiss's subordinates should not be optimistic either. At present, it seems that the other dimension world he controls has also had problems. In addition, the barbarians themselves are big consumers of food. And they consume much more than the knights. Or do both sides think they have the means to defeat each other in one go through a head-on confrontation? Chapter 178 Thunder Giant. From the time Ryan got the news to the time he rushed to the front, the armies led by Count Winter and Count Soren began a crazy attack on Count Weiss. They seemed to want to drive the other side's army out of their county, and then the armies of the two earls simultaneously attacked Count Weiss's army on the edge of Red Wing Plain. If they could gather the forces of the two counties on the same battlefield, they would indeed have an absolute advantage. However, Count Weiss also did not put up any resistance, allowing his army to retreat step by step and return to the base camp of Red Wing Plain. By the time Ryan's army arrived at the front line, Count Soren had driven out all the enemies who entered Longshan County at the cost of more than 1,000 deaths. Along the way, Ryan could see the stripped bodies thrown in the corner. The stench was overwhelming. Burn it, Ryan gave an order, allowing him and his army to avoid this pursuit war, and arrived at the front line just in the short time when both sides ended. Lord Earl, Ryan came to a huge mobile fortress. This fortress was a square military tent built of gray-red stones. It had an area of about 150 square meters. The 28 wheels underneath pulled out dents in the mud. The surface was engraved with magic patterns. The mobile fortress was pulled by 6 ferocious one-horned rhinos, whose cracked skin carried and exuded a hot breath. Each of them was a peak second-level magic beast. Just standing there, the nearly 3-meter-high back gave people a sense of oppression. Such a mobile fortress could not be made without 30,000 to 50,000 gold coins. Don't underestimate 30,000 to 50,000 gold coins. The income of an ordinary baron's territory in 10 years could not reach this number. This is now that there is a lord system, the baron's territory is larger, and the population is larger. Baron Ryan came at the right time. We just won the war against Thundercloud County, and you came. Before Earl Soren spoke, someone next to him started to speak in a weird way. Ryan looked over and saw a man with inverted triangle eyes. In the aristocratic circle, such a face is not welcome. Viscount Denton, the Viscount of Longshan County, is also a local noble in the former Northwind province who surrendered to the Empire. Since they are not imperial nobles, the experience of this family becoming nobles is also different from others. Their family bloodline, from generation to generation, is a warlock, good at controlling beasts such as venomous snakes. According to the legend of Viscount Denton's family, there is a 300-meter-long snake in their family territory as their patron saint. In short, such nobles are not welcome in the imperial aristocratic circle. They can only rely on Earl Solon to ensure that their family is not lonely. Baron Ryan, you are indeed a little late. If you had your army, we wouldn't have so many casualties. The white-haired Earl Solon looked at Ryan and said, he was also a little dissatisfied. Ryan spoke to Earl Solon apologetically. We encountered a lot of corpses on the road. I can only arrange for the soldiers to burn them. Otherwise, when the weather gets warmer in a few days, it will be bad if there is a plague. Leon is a little strange. Why do we have time to strip the corpses as trophies, but not to clean them up? Ryan's words made Earl Soren a little unhappy, but as a great noble, his expression did not change. Let's not talk about this for now. Now the Wise family has been forced to the Red Wing Plain by us. Earl Winter and I have discussed that tomorrow we will both attack Love Weiss at the same time. Ryan, what do you think about this war? What can Ryan think? He doesn't even know what the army on this battlefield looks like, and he doesn't know what means these great nobles have. Since the Earl has decided, then Ryan will of course follow the Earl's will. Early the next morning, the mighty army of 20,000 to 30,000 made every soldier and noble in it excited. No matter who they were, they had never seen such a spectacular scene. The most important thing is that among these armies, only 1/3 of them are temporary soldiers formed by slaves, and the rest are all regular soldiers who are half-time. Ryan led more than 3,000 people from Lingdu County to the west of the army. From a distance, his army lineup was the best. Because even the troops under Earl Soren could not stand straight from the side, and there was a wheat ear on the top of each person's head, which looked very powerful and intimidating. This frozen earth baron is really a powerful military genius. He can turn the army into this. Looking at the silent soldiers over there, who did not shake their heads, many nobles in Longshan County envied them. How great it would be if they were their own soldiers. As if they felt the gazes around them, thousands of soldiers behind Ryan subconsciously held their heads high, and even Baron Enzo beside him looked cold, like a general who was confident. Ryan smiled in his heart after feeling this scene. These soldiers still had idle burdens at this time, but when the battlefield started, they might not care about their face. Thinking of this, his pupils turned red and shrank, as if he was about to turn into wheat spikes, and looked at the end of the Red Wing Plain in front of him. There, the flags were flying, and the Black Barbarian army was releasing a strong blood force, and the startled war horses were also neighing in a low voice. The moment the Thunder and Mountain flags appeared, Ryan also saw the Thunder Giant that he had been thinking about. It can be seen from a distance. Because it is too tall, with a huge body of more than 20 to 30 meters high, most of the city walls are just thresholds in front of the other party. The whole person looks like a giant barbarian, with thick hair all over his face and chest, and animal skins scattered on the vital parts of his body. The lightning flashing frequently on the surface of his body should be the reason why he cannot wear metal armor. But in his hands, he held two nearly 10-meter-long ball-headed sledgehammers. Everyone who saw this scene couldn't help swallowing their saliva, fearing that if the terrible weapon fell, the ground would be smashed into a hole. The most important thing is that the opponent not only has extremely powerful physical damage, but also thunder magic damage. When a thunder comes down, I don't know how to block it. Can the Dragon Blood Warrior Corps stop such a thunder giant? Ryan looked at the Red Legion in the center of the army. Each of them is a descendant of a knight bathed in dragon blood. They are naturally stronger than others. It is said that the armor and weapons they wear are as high as 100 or 200 pounds. He shook his head. The Dragon Blood Warrior Corps is just a heavy infantry. Such an army can deal with smaller enemies. But it is absolutely restrained when facing a monster like the Thunder Giant, which has a guaranteed sanctuary as long as it reaches adulthood. Their mobility and defense are the best toys in front of the giant. Therefore, the one who should deal with the giant should be the Earl of Winter. Ryan looked towards the southwest, and vaguely seemed to be able to feel a large amount of powerful energy and blood boiling there. Chapter 179, Battle of the Holy Land. As the saying goes, plans cannot keep up with changes. The war did not go in the direction Ryan wanted. Through one small war after another, he gradually united his army into a rope. Various factors brought the war directly to a white-hot stage. The Red Wing Plains gathered 100,000 soldiers from all parties, which was completely able to sweep across most of the dukedoms in the south. The entire North Wind province was paying attention to this place, and even some southern nobles who had gossip channels were curious about the outcome and appearance of the war here. Earl Winter also made a grand appearance at the end. As soon as he arrived, he became the center of the battlefield because he flew down from the sky. Hundreds of flying wolf cavalrymen made countless knights and nobles envious, because it was not just an extraordinary legion, but also represented that every knight had a powerful and desirable mount, and could fly. Not only that, behind Earl Winter's army, there was a group of mage corps in robes. In the entire North Wind province, only Earl Winter, who was in charge of the North Wind city as the governor, had the strength to support a mage corps. The Extraordinary Corps and the Mage Corps. It is said that there are some other extraordinary systems. Count Winter is the most powerful noble in the North Wind province. If the conditions were not getting more and more stringent, he might not be able to become a Grand Duke. It is precisely for this reason that Count Winter has never figured out why Love Weiss dared to do so. Just relying on the Barbarian Corps? Just relying on the Thunder Giant? This cannot make up for the gap between the two sides. Love, Count Winter roared. If you admit the defeat of the war now and wrongly break the rules of the nobles, you can still keep the fire of the barbarians, otherwise after today, you will lose your extraordinary corps and most of your wealth. The North will usher in a huge opportunity, and you will get nothing, Count Winter scolded Count Weiss. The voice of the Holy Knight was loud enough to spread throughout the battlefield, and his words would appear in thousands of households because of these soldiers. Count Weiss did not respond, but his palms were clenched tightly, and the emblem ring representing the Count Weiss family on his hand was crushed into pieces by him. Damn it, damn Winter family, this is the land of Northgard, and I am the king of this land. I have the heritage of the kingdom, and I am the legitimate heir of this land. He was roaring in his heart, but he did not say these words out loud, otherwise the nobles around him would betray him. Arno. Let our Earl Winter see what you are capable of. Earl Weiss's eyes seemed to be a storm that gave birth to thunder, and he roared at the Thunder Giant. The next moment, the giant rushed towards Earl Winter with a giant hammer, his legs trampled on the ground, and every step was a big pit. Thunder and lightning covered the sky. With the roar of the giant, the sky of Red Wing Plain became gloomy, dark clouds began to gather, and thunder flashed in it. At a certain moment, above the gloomy sky, the thunder exploded from the sky, piercing the darkness and carrying the power of destruction to roar over Earl Winter's head. The speed of thunder made the Holy Knight unable to react, and he could only use the magic armor on his body to resist. Boom! The remaining power blasted a huge deep pit on the ground, and charred smoke flew out of it. Countless people watched this scene in fear. This is the power of the Thunder Giant, which is comparable to the fighting power of the Holy Land. And what opposes this power is wealth, and the shiny gold punk. The magic armor worth 300,000, with secret patterns flashing violently on the surface. Count Winter forcibly endured a destructive power of thunder, but did not suffer much damage, but his blood was a little embarrassed. He stared at the Thunder Giant rushing towards him. Even he did not dare to take the power of the giant hammer in the opponent's hand, but as a knight, he did not have pure physical strength. In the distance, there was a magician chanting a magician, and a powerful forbidden spell fell on Count Winter. At this moment, his strength, his flesh and blood, his blood, were all climbing and boiling crazily, becoming incomparably powerful. Giant God's wrath. Some nobles recognized the origin of this forbidden magic spell. This was a forbidden spell that magicians learned when they spied on the war between giants, comparable to gods in the pan-dimensional War of Gods. Once released, even a magician with a fragile body will have the world's top body and strength. A brainless monster dares to appear in front of me, Earl Winter roared. For him, this forbidden magic spell had no side effects and would only bring him unimaginable power. The knight's longsword in his hand, breath of phantom light, burst into dazzling light like the sun, and then thousands of blood-red tigers fell from the sky. Knight's combat skills, sword of the Mountain King. Thousands of blood-red tigers were all transformed by the strong blood in Earl Winter's body that was comparable to that of a dragon. The giant swung his hammer wildly and defeated the tigers one by one, but in a certain moment, the quasi-legendary weapon longsword descended. Even if the giant sensed a crisis from the thunder, he could only lift a hammer reluctantly. The knight's fighting skills not only mobilized the knight's body and strength, but also the extraordinary fighting spirit. With the blessing of the giant god's wrath, Count Winter's strength has surpassed the giant in front of him. When the two weapons collided, the sharp edge of the breath of phantom light instantly cut off the metal hammer, and then fell on the giant's skin that was harder than metal. The thunder was raging, and the giant roared in pain and anger. The world within a radius of several hundred meters was filled with countless thunders at this moment. The giant directly abandoned his weapon and clenched his fists to smash Count Winter frantically. The thunder slowed his speed. Facing the giant's attack, Count Winter was not afraid at all. He kept swinging the knight's sword in his hand, chopping the giant's hands deep into the bones and bloody. Monsters are monsters. Count Winter suddenly fell from the sky and hit the ground. The noise he made when he fell was even louder than the sound of the broken ball hammer hitting the ground. It can be imagined that the quality of Count Winter's body at this moment was beyond imagination. Standing on the ground, Count Winter's blood and ki rose violently again, as if he could receive some kind of blessing from the ground. The wrath of the giant god is itself a means for the extremely powerful giant to ignite the anger of the world. Count Winter raised the knight's longsword in his hand, and the infinite fighting spirit and the majestic blood and ki gathered on the longsword. The surface of this sword, which was less than 2 meters long, gradually gathered into a 30-meter-long light blade. Knight's combat skill, frenzy. The strong wind rolled up the dark clouds, and the light blade slashed at the giant who was already covered with dense thunder. The sky of the entire Red Wing Plain flashed and illuminated the moment. Chapter 180 Legion War. The garish light was not a special effect or pollution. It was not a fake picture across the screen, but a terrifying and extraordinary method that really appeared in front of Ryan. He watched the war between the sanctuaries with an infatuated expression. Not only him, but also Brand and Baron Enzo beside him were like this, dreaming that they would be the protagonists in such a battle. Too powerful. The sanctuary-level knight combat skills displayed by the sanctuary knights are not just a small fight, but a force that can destroy the world. The sanctuary is like this. How terrible is the legend? Ryan's heart surged, and the battle in the sanctuary on the other side had already reached its peak. The endless thunder turned into the weapons and armor of the giants, colliding with the light blade of Earl Winter, and the roar brought about made the earth tremble, and the sky also roared and echoed. When the light faded, the thunder giant knelt on one knee, blood flowing on the muddy and ravaged land, bloody wounds all over his arms, and the terrifying blood mark on his chest was gushing out a limit of blood that a human can have with every breath. The giant cannot fall down, unless he dies, because once he falls down, the giant will never be able to stand up again. Even when they sleep, they sit. Therefore, facing the terrible supply of Count Winter, the thunder giant chose to resist, or in his heart, like a beast, there is no option to escape. Count Winter, who has the so-called logistics of the magic group, gasped heavily, and his consumption was also huge. The knight is originally a representative of endurance in many extraordinary systems, but it depends on who you are compared with, right? The giant surpasses the knight himself in all aspects. If external forces are not considered, human knights are not the opponents of the giants at all. But the reason why humans have become the overlords of the world is not because of their wisdom and hands-on ability. Attack. After the Thunder Giant was defeated, two powerful Sky Knights, Earl Soren and Earl Winter's younger brother, issued the order to attack at the same time. Why wait until the end of the Sanctuary War to attack? Of course, even the powerful Sanctuary Knights could not compare to Thunder Giant in terms of the lethality and morale-destroying power of the army on the battlefield. If the Thunder Giant charged on the battlefield, the army of one side would probably be defeated, and the extraordinary legions of the two earls were not good at dealing with giants. Thunder could destroy the flying wolf cavalry flying in the sky but with weak defense, and the terrifying power of the giant could easily crush the dragon blood warriors. Boom boom boom. Thousands of people trampled on the ground, resonating and roaring, and the iron hooves of the war horses seemed to be the unfinished thunder just now, tearing through all defenses like a broken bamboo from far to near, and the powerful knights controlled their own power and turned the heavy metal suit into a millstone to crush the enemy. Soldiers from three directions were charging. Even the disadvantaged side of Count Weiss did not choose to defend, because the barbarians did not know how to fight a defensive war. They waved their giant axes and rushed towards the enemy without fear of death. Kill. Roaring in anger, the slaved soldiers at the front could only use this only way to vent their inner fear. At this moment, they could not even escape, because there were even more soldiers charging behind them. Moving forward was their only possibility to survive. Wearing the cheapest defensive cloth armor and holding the most fragile spears, these slaved soldiers also became the first batch of flesh and blood crushed by the barbarians on the battlefield. Blood was flying, and fragments of flesh and blood were scattered on the ground. Broken arms, torn chests and abdomens, and flesh and blood rolling to both sides brought endless despair and painful wails. However, with more and more roars and roars, these wails gradually drowned in the corners of the battlefield until the owner of the voice could no longer make any movement from his throat. Kill. The uniform roar of killing intent made the barbarians who rushed in front of them stunned for a moment. At this moment, hundreds of soldiers had already thrust their spears forward. The barbarians who were a moment slower were pierced by the sharpness of the spears. They had no metal armor to protect them. The spears penetrated the chests and abdomens of the barbarians, but most of the barbarians became more violent and bloodthirsty. They turned on the crazy mode. The huge axes in their hands plus their own terrifying power directly smashed a dent in the hard armor. Once they were hit, the soldiers under the armor would most likely die. Hold the formation, don't mess up. Ryan, who was wearing a mithril armor, was really dazzling, but he also understood this, so he stayed in the center of his army. The 500 knight attendants around him defended his life fearlessly. As a knight with a deeper background than any silver knight, Ryan's voice was loud and clear, and his blood and ki were not chaotic on the battlefield. This made his voice seem to have some kind of magic, allowing the soldiers who were terrified and bloodthirsty to maintain a considerable rationality. Harrington. Enzo. Lead your soldiers to attack from both wings, and do not retreat, Ryan commanded in the middle of the army, and at the same time, a unique horn sounded beside him. 1 minute, 2 minutes, on the side of the battlefield that was like a meat grinder. 5 minutes later, the bloody and primitive fighting finally made Ryan's more than 3,000 soldiers present a concave formation. He personally led 1,500 people in the front, while Harrington and Baron Enzo led 1,000 people each to rush forward from both sides. Don't mess up. Ryan rode his warhorse and looked into the distance. He could not surpass Earl Soren's army too much, otherwise the 1,000 soldiers protruding from one side would be flanked. On this battlefield of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, fighting alone was absolutely not an option. Let them in, kill them from three directions. Even with Ryan's constant orders, the army's formation inevitably became chaotic over time. Gradually, Ryan himself approached the front facing the enemy. Beside him, Brand was on guard, with a knight sword in his hand shining coldly. 500 knight attendants were already fighting and colliding with the barbarians. This most elite army in the frozen land was inevitably at a disadvantage when facing the barbarians. Fortunately, the advantage in numbers could make up for this. The balance of the war was tilting towards Ryan little by little. Although his army's formation was a little chaotic, the opponent had long been in a mess. Many soldiers did not realize that they were surrounded by enemies until they broke into the notch of Ryan's army. Fear was meaningless, and these soldiers were soon pierced by the spears around them. As time passed for nearly an hour, Ryan's army, which was on the edge, became the first army on Earl Soren's side to defeat the enemy. Ryan stopped the soldiers who were still around him and advanced towards the center of the battlefield little by little. Chapter 181, The War is Fierce, and the Giants Recover. Kill. Thousands of soldiers under Ryan could feel their own strength. Even barbarians were killed by them. When they rushed to the center of the battlefield, their eyes were fanatical and their blood was boiling. They were not slaves. Each of them was a regular army under the nobles behind them. They were elites. So for them, the meaning of military exploits was not just to keep them alive, but to allow their lives and their descendants to enjoy better treatment. For military exploits and for the future, the soldiers became more and more crazy. This frozen earth baron is unmatched in military affairs. In the distance, Earl Soren watched Ryan's army killing people everywhere. Even now, the soldiers belonging to Lingdu County are still the most recognizable legion on the battlefield. Whether in spirit or behavior, they are very different from other soldiers. On the other side, Earl Weiss's expression was much gloomier. Because of Ryan's variable, his army collapsed too quickly. From Liayan County and a small number of troops from Yinchuan County, the number of Earl Weiss's troops on the Red Wing Plain was less than 50,000, and they were fighting against the coalition forces of several counties. Because there are more barbarians, or because of a previous sneak attack and assassination, the extraordinary legions of Count Winter and Count Soren suffered heavy losses, so that his barbarians can not only resist the two extraordinary legions, but also separate some to fight other ordinary armies. Originally, this was to stabilize the army from collapse, but even the barbarians seemed unable to establish any obvious effect on such a battlefield. Barbarians are also human beings. Being pierced by a spear in a non-vital place will make them stronger, but if 7 or 8 spears are stabbed out, the barbarians will also die in a frenzy. Activate the potions in those slaves. For this war, Count Weiss didn't know how many things he prepared and how much wealth he gave away. Of course, he couldn't not prepare the most important magic potions. Those potions have too many side effects. Once activated, it is impossible for slaves to survive. Of course, slaves are useless. The development of the territory, farming or mining, or building houses and reclaiming wasteland, so unless it is absolutely necessary, even Count Weiss doesn't want too many slaves to die. But now he really can't care so much. If he loses the war, he will lose more wealth. Behind Earl Weiss, several magicians in black robes were whispering and chanting. After a while, the soldiers on the battlefield gradually responded. Bang! The moment the knight's sword and spear collided, Gastro's face changed. As the most loyal soldier of Lord Ryan, he thought that his loyalty was only second to Lord Brand. When the war came, he stood in front of Ryan without retreating. The enemy in front of him was not a new opponent. He fought with him several times, but this time the power from the opponent's hand made him frightened. He raised his head and looked at the enemy's eyes under the armor. I don't know when, the opponent's eyes and mouth were filled with black breath. Took the magic potion. As a former slave and now a knight's attendant, Gastro also learned a lot of knowledge under Ryan's command. Among the wealth that he regarded as precious, he naturally described the magic of this world. At this moment, seeing the opponent's attack method that was less and less like a human and more like a monster, Gastro quickly reacted. He blocked with a sword and then roared loudly. They took magic potions. His roar reminded the soldiers around him, but those farther away were not so lucky. In just a short breath of time, the local war could be reversed. A large number of soldiers were seriously injured or even lost their lives in the enemy's sudden strength and beast-like madness. Ryan stared at the soldiers who roared unconsciously in their throats and frowned. It was not a magic potion he knew. It should come from some magician's specialty, and it seemed to be very costly. Don't mess around. No matter how powerful you are, you can't beat us who are invincible, Ryan roared, then rushed forward and chopped off the head of an enemy with a sword. He didn't believe that there was any magic potion that could turn all ordinary soldiers into knights at once. Even his divine blessing couldn't do this. It could only turn ordinary people into trainees who had been trained for many years. Soldiers like these beasts are only stronger individually. Without coordination, they may not be stronger than their own army in the same number. Brand, don't worry about me, go to the front and kill the enemy. We must crush the enemy's morale as quickly as possible. Ryan certainly understood that the longer this war dragged on, the more both sides would have to exchange soldiers, and that would be when no army could avoid heavy casualties. Brand rushed out, but Ryan's eyes looked into the distance because of the roar of the earth. The 1,000 cavalry led by Viscount Hogg were like fish in water on such a battlefield. He could choose his enemies at will. A strong charge could cause chaos in an army of thousands of people. Although the cost would not be small, the other side seemed determined to turn this gradually declining war around. I don't know why. Boom. Above the sky, the roaring thunder brought the battlefield to a standstill for a moment. Ryan looked at the position of the thunder giant in the distance. The thunder giant stood up again. There were flashes of thunder on the wounds on his body, and the dark clouds above his head gathered again. The falling thunder struck the giant's body, making him roar in pain or pleasure. How many good things does that idiot love have? At this moment, Count Winter admitted that he began to envy the other dimensional world that Count Weiss found. The means to restore the Thunder Giant to its peak were definitely not something that ordinary magic potions could do. He looked at the magicians behind him. How long will it take to release the wrath of the giant again? The middle-aged woman under the robe looked embarrassed. It will take at least half an hour to prepare, so long. In order to support your previous battle, our monolos was very large, and there is no magic tower around. This woman was also a powerful great magician. Then use other buff magic, and find an opportunity to attack, leaving Count Winter alone without any logistical help, especially with the blessing of the forbidden spell Giant God's Wrath. He had no confidence in being able to deal with the Thunder Giant, and it looked like the Thunder Giant had not become much weaker after recovery. The power of the giant was enough to crush many people. Chapter 182, The Assassin Reappears, The War Leans. Without the wrath of the Titan, Count Winter could not confront the Titan head-on, but he had to stop him because the Titan was heading towards his army. The Flying Wolf cavalry in the sky tried to approach to stop them, but the thunder was surging like a storm. Some Flying Wolf cavalry fell from the sky, and both their mounts and the people were charred. There was almost no chance of survival. This scene made the leader of the Knights Hora look terrified. He commanded the Flying Wolf cavalry to continue fighting against the barbarians and no longer paid attention to the Titan. Count Winter arrived, and not only him, this time there were 5 Sky Knights who appeared around the Thunder Giant, from the Count Winter family and the Count Soren family. My Lord Count, no need to salute on the battlefield, concentrate on dealing with this monster, and if possible, kill him. When the Thunder Giant began to threaten the war, Count Winter no longer hesitated. Once he had the chance, he would definitely kill him. The Thunder Giant attacked the army. Count Winter and others tried their best to stop it. As long as they waited for half an hour, the wizard's new round of forbidden spells would arrive, and Count Winter was sure to kill the Thunder Giant on the battlefield. The giant will not be Count Winter's opponent. He not only has the support of the wizard group, but also the Countess, a sanctuary magician. If she appears on the battlefield with the wizard tower, the giant will die. Beside Count Weiss, Hector Weiss, the eldest son of the Count, said, "Father, a Thunder Giant is not enough to win the victory of this war, especially since he is not yet a full adult." He did not want the Thunder Giant to die like this, and he also knew that his father's trump card was not just a Thunder Giant. Count Weiss's eyes showed contemplation, and I don't know what he was thinking. Brand, one weakness and another exhaustion, suppress them, and the magic potion will naturally make them collapse. Ryan had personally come to the front with a knight's sword. Only the barbarians could pose a threat to him, but now there were no barbarians on the battlefield. Facing a group of slaves who had turned into wild beasts, Ryan could only swing his sword and bring blood. However, at a certain moment when he swung his sword, an extremely piercing chill came from behind him. At the critical moment, Ryan roared, and the strong blood in his body burst out. The condensed blood actually formed a layer of blazing flame defense on the surface of his body. The majesty of the dragon was faintly reflected in the flames, and the outline of dragon scales flashed. Bang! The huge force made Ryan stagger. He turned his head and saw a Catman assassin, about 1 meter tall, emerging from the shadows. His face flushed, and the next moment blood spurted out. The surrounding knights and attendants were extremely angry. There was an assassin who wanted to assassinate Master Ryan among them. The most important thing was that they didn't react at all. Damn it, the knights and attendants roared, not knowing whether they were angry at the Catman assassin or themselves. 7 or 8 knights' long swords fell heavily, directly chopping the Catman assassin into pieces. Cat people have always been at the bottom of the orcs. I didn't expect that there would be such a powerful extraordinary system, integrated with the power of shadows. And not affected at all in this chaotic battlefield. Count Weiss, are you really crazy? Ryan looked into the distance. It was okay to do it secretly before, but now he dared to assassinate nobles on the battlefield openly. Not to mention how many successes there were. Even if only one baron died at the hands of the assassin on the battlefield, Count Weiss would have absolutely no chance of taking over the Northwind province. What's the point of doing this? Kill, Ryan roared angrily. If he hadn't reached the Silver Knight at the same time with 3 night breathing methods, bringing extremely powerful blood and fighting spirit, the mithril armor on his body might not be able to block the cat assassin's rapier. A surge of anger rose in his heart, and the anger of new and old hatreds made Ryan's hands burn with flames, and then the flames spread to the knight's long sword. Every time he swung, the power of dragon roars rippled in the void. The dragon roar brought the dragon's might. All the slave soldiers who had taken the magic potion trembled in fear. The magic potion that turned them into monsters became their fatal weakness at this moment. Even if the enemy's sharp weapons pierced their flesh and blood, they trembled and crawled on the ground, fearing the majesty of the dragon. The battlefield was reversed at this moment. Ryan turned over and rode on the warhorse. He was wearing silver-white armor and raised the burning sword in his hand high. Victory will belong to Ryan. 10,000 wins. 10,000 wins. 10,000 wins. One soldier after another roared, and the roar resounded through the sky of the battlefield, attracting the attention of many nobles. That little guy from the Clayton family actually revived the dragon's fighting spirit in his blood. Earl Weiss was very surprised. He knew a lot about the Clayton family. Even if he didn't know before, when the Clayton family was rumored to become the 5th Archduke, all the nobles would try their best to find out. If there is such potential, why would they let him go to the north? Earl Weiss was a little puzzled, but he fell silent when he thought of what Ryan had done in the North Wind province. With such talent and potential, how bad would it be even in the north? Lingdu County has now become Baron Ryan's back garden, which is much better than many nobles in the south. Father, Viscount Hogg, is obviously afraid of Baron Ryan. He has never dared to lead the army to attack Baron Ryan's army, Hector said with anger in his eyes. At this moment, under the leadership of the Flaming Sword, the war is constantly tilting in a direction that does not belong to them. Viscount Hogg's cavalry, in coordination with the infantry, killed people on the battlefield. Everyone saw the power of the cavalry, but at the same time, Baron Ryan's army was larger in number and advanced faster, and there would be no problem of breaking through and making the battlefield more chaotic. The torn army and the fallen part will only become lambs to be slaughtered. On the other side, the Thunder Giant was also blocked by Count Winter and several Sky Knights on the open ground. The thunder roared, but at most it affected hundreds of soldiers in the distance. It was no longer possible to destroy Count Winter's army. The Flying Wolf Knight Corps and the Dragon Blood Warrior Corps were gradually eating away at their barbarian army. The extraordinary legion of Count Weiss's family was still too young, and the barbarians were an extraordinary soldier that was difficult to form a formation. They could not compare with those extraordinary legions that had been maintained for hundreds of years. It was okay when there was an advantage in numbers, but once the numbers were balanced, the disadvantages of no training and no discipline would become the fatal weakness of the barbarian legion. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183, Fullmetal Alchemist, The Iron Dragon of Redwing Plain. If there are no other means, Earl Weiss will fail. Ryan could already see that the soldiers belonging to Thundercloud County were collapsing. The fear brought by the war finally overwhelmed the Earl's majestic rule at this moment. What other means are there? Ryan looked at the flag of Earl Weiss's family. This great nobleman would not want to swallow up the entire North Wind province with just such a small trump card, right? When Ryan thought about this, he also asked his army to retreat. He didn't want to stand in the front. On the other side, Earl Weiss, who heard that many cat assassins had returned in vain, finally made up his mind. Wayne, Earl Weiss shouted, and then there was a sound of metal collision behind him, as if dozens of wind chimes were constantly colliding under the robe. Hector, who was standing next to him, could hear the rotation of the mechanism and gears. Mr. Wayne, Hector saluted and looked at the alchemist whose head was hidden under the robe. One of the other's eyes was not a physical eye, but a kind of gem forged and embedded in the eye socket. Lord Earl, you have finally made up your mind. Stop talking nonsense, Vane. Let me see if you alchemists are as powerful as you say. If you can't do it, I promise you will die miserably. Vane laughed meanly. Don't worry, Lord Earl. We have been preparing for this day for 10 years, so. Vane looked at Count Weiss, who took out an exquisite box with mountains and plains carved on it, lush, prosperous and flourishing. The moment he opened the box, Vane was shaking all over. He excitedly stretched out his mechanical arm and touched the thumb-sized stone inside. The Philosopher's Stone. I finally saw the highest achievement of alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone. Don't waste time, Get started. Vane raised his head with fanatical eyes. We've already prepared it. After saying that, more than 40 alchemists came out from behind him. They drove pack horses and moved the huge metal objects from more than a dozen carriages. Then they arranged them into an altar. Vane personally walked up to the altar and poured the liquids from hundreds of bottles and jars. Dragons buried under the world, I devoutly call for your return. As the power released by the alchemists on the altar became stronger and stronger, a wizard from the undead sanctuary appeared in the sky. The gray-white magic formed a circle of swirling clouds in the sky. As the undead spell was completed, the ground was shaking. What's going on? Ryan felt the warhorse under him was uneasy. The shaking of the earth made them feel a certain fearful aura was emerging. Gradually, Ryan himself felt it. Is this the dragon's might? The earth cracked, and a huge white bone claw stretched out from the crack, followed by an even larger body. It was the rotten skeleton of a giant dragon, but only the feet and claws could be seen. Is this the flying dragon that once inhabited the Red Wing Plain? Looking at the 7 or 8 meter tall flying dragon skeleton in front of him, Ryan swallowed his saliva. No one knew that under this Red Wing Plain, there were actually two-legged flying dragon skeletons buried. In other words, under this land, isn't there a large amount of extraordinary materials and the largest magic crystal vein in the North Wind Province? The trembling of the ground continued. As the spell of the necromancer continued, the second and third skeletons took less than a minute to appear. A full 15 two-legged flying dragon skeletons appeared on the battlefield. The deterrence and fear they brought were far more terrifying than the taller thunder giant, because there were too many of them. When they were alive, they were at least comparable to the flying dragons of the Holy Land, right? Someone said tremblingly, but this was not enough to scare the army, especially since the Wind Wolf Cavalry Corps and the Dragon Blood Warrior Corps were approaching. Their power might not be able to kill these undead creations. But it was not over yet. The skeletons of the summoned flying dragons were in tatters, and the rotten bones were breaking and falling to the ground. As for the intact skeletons, they flew into the sky under some kind of power exchange. The skeletons of 15 flying dragons were picked and chosen. Finally, a huge dragon with 6 limbs and 6 heads opened its 4 bone wings. The roar of the ancient dragon roared through the sky of the Red Wing Plain. All the mounts crawled on the ground and could no longer stand up. Ryan stood on the ground, shocked to see the hundreds of meters-long dragon appear above the battlefield. The dragon power emanating from it made his blood hot instinctively. But it was still not over. In the distance, on the alchemist's altar, Vane looked at the dragon in the sky with fanatical eyes. Under the control of the necromancer, the dragon began to land on the ground. At this time, below the Red Wing Plain, there were surging rivers flying out from the cracks. No, that was not a river, but molten iron from the huge iron ore under the ground of the Red Wing Plain. The molten iron seemed to come alive, and the liquid covered the surface of the bone dragon. Under the sunlight, a huge metal dragon with 6 heads, 6 legs and 4 wings appeared in the center of the battlefield. The Philosopher's Stone, a creation that can replace any material, let's use it as the soul of the dragon. The Philosopher's Stone in Vane's hand emitted a scorching light, and then fell into the empty eye sockets of the steel dragon. The next moment, light appeared in the dark eye sockets, and the dragon spread its wings and roared again. This is a legend, Count Winter roared in horror. He actually felt a breath of legend on the steel dragon. Count Weiss floated in the sky and landed on the head of the steel dragon. He was also a powerful thunder mage and became the master of the dragon at this moment. Looking down at the nobles on the battlefield, Count Weiss looked at Count Soren and Count Winter. Surrender. The victory of the war belongs to the Weiss family, and I deserve to take back the glory that belongs to the Weiss bloodline. Weiss, are you too happy too early? Count Soren stood on the ground, pointing the great sword in his hand at the Iron Dragon. It's not like the legendary creatures that have been created have never been killed before, really. Count Weiss's silent body trembled, followed by a loud and wanton roar. Murthoron, are you getting old and confused? I have thunder giants, legendary dragons, and tens of thousands of troops on this battlefield. What can you use to win? Humph. Count Thoron looked at Count Winter and said, I said it before, this ungrateful wolf can't start a war against us without any preparation, right? The thunder giant can't even beat you, but he still wants to rule the entire North Wind Province. You are the governor of the North Wind Province. This big guy's left to you. After Count Thoron finished speaking, he led his Dragon Blood Warrior army to retreat to the rear. On the other side, Count Winter was still hesitating, but after hearing what Count Thoron said, He knew that he couldn't win in this matter. He tore open a scroll, and then the portal of space was opened, and a towering 30-meter-high tower appeared above the sky of the battlefield. It was the Mage Tower. On the top floor of the Mage Tower, Countess Winter stood and looked outside. The next moment, the Mage Tower surged with infinite magic power, causing strong winds and rainstorms to fall all over the sky of the Red Wing Plain. In the strong winds, the thin soldiers could not even stand, and the world seemed to be in chaos at this moment. This is the magician, a powerful magician. With the power of one person, he caused strange phenomena in the world. Ryan stared blankly at the strong winds and rainstorms in the sky. No wonder the magician can be called the most powerful extraordinary system. The powerful magic that can face the gods directly is the stolen power comparable to that of the gods. In particular, the Countess Winter is also a space magician. Now it seems that the other party not only masters space magic, but also has the knowledge of wind and water magic. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chapter 184 The Great Terror of Space Magic. Countess Winter looked at the giant iron dragon in the sky, raised the expensive staff in her hand, and floated in front of the Mage Tower. Her clothes rustled, and the wind and rain surrounded her. As a noble mage, she was unimaginably powerful. The staff in her hand followed the wind and rain, and the gem on it also emitted a dazzling light. The next moment, the world was shining. Whether it was the sunlight in the sky or the eyes of the humans on the battlefield below, they were all swallowed by the gems. The void became like a clear and smooth mirror. With the chanting of Countess Winter, the void mirror began to break. The broken space turned into a sharp blade and turned into a storm surrounding the giant iron dragon. The realm of the void, storm, the powerful sanctuary spell enveloped the giant iron dragon, and Van on the alchemy altar jumped anxiously. You fool, the philosopher's stone enriched your soul and gave you wisdom, defend yourself quickly. Of course, he knew the terribleness of space spells, which were said to be sharper than even the gods. As if it had heard the words of the iron alchemist, the iron dragon in the sky gathered its 4 huge wings and covered its entire body. From a distance, it looked like a huge iron ball appeared in the sky. But it was meaningless. Everyone underestimated Countess Winter's space mage. Those space blades easily tore the dragon's iron flesh, and made a ping-pong sound on the dragon's bones that had not decayed for hundreds of years. However, soon, the dragon's bones were cut off, just like an ant nest that had collapsed. The storm of space blades seemed to have found a gap, like a flood surging and crashing. 1 second, 2 seconds. Only 10 seconds had passed, and the daunting iron dragon in the sky was torn into huge wounds. If it were not for its body being made of bones and steel and without any weaknesses, it would have fallen into death long ago. In the sky, the necromancer chanted magic again, and the dragon skeleton scattered on the ground began to fly into the sky, trying to repair the dragon's body, and the activated metal liquid was also flowing. If the dragon had time, it would still be able to recover. But it was too late. The magicians who had the Mage Tower had 2 most powerful advantages. One was the endless magic power that could support them to release any powerful spells. The other was that the first thing any mage who had the Mage Tower had to do was to engrave the forbidden spells they were good at in the Mage Tower. That would not only allow them to release forbidden spells through the Mage Tower, but more importantly, it would not require a long period of preparation. The Mage Tower was the medium for the mages to solidify their magic. The only difference was that powerful mages would only solidify the forbidden spells with terrifying power in the Mage Tower. Forbidden spell, Void Trap. The sky where the Iron Dragon was located suddenly collapsed into a dark hole, a singularity. From the singularity came a terrifying devouring force. Even Ryan, who was thousands of meters away, felt the great fear of being devoured, not to mention the Iron Dragon that was so close. Roar, the Iron Dragon was roaring, but it was meaningless. The compression and devouring force brought by the space collapse devoured the huge iron dragon bit by bit like a meat grinder. The metal was twisting, and the dragon's skeleton was annihilated. 3 seconds later, the huge dragon, which was 100 meters long, was swallowed up and shattered by the dark void in the void without even releasing its own terrifying power. This is the power of space. After releasing the forbidden spell, the tall wizard tower also dimmed a little. But this still could not stop the power of the wizard tower and the space wizard in countless eyes. Since she had already made a move, Countess Winter would certainly not give up. With the wizard tower, she could use most of the spells she was good at. Vay made a move in anger. He tore off his robe. In his metal body, Only a beating heartbeat proved his identity as a flesh and blood body. He charged towards Countess Winter like a fierce dragon. The spell of space fell on him, leaving scratches on the surface of the metal. Yes, his body was harder than the previous steel dragon, because every piece of metal used was not comparable to the molten iron made from iron ore. Give me back my legendary creation, Vayne was furious. He wanted to use the Iron Dragon to achieve his legendary status step by step, but now it was all gone. His 10 years of hard work, all the resources he had spent, and the wealth of Count Weiss were all gone. As a Sanctuary-level alchemist, he charged at the Sanctuary Mage like a knight at this moment. On his metal arm, there was a laser-like weapon attacking the Mage Tower in the sky, but it was extremely difficult for him to get close to a Space Mage. On the other side, the Necromancer of the same Sanctuary also released a forbidden spell belonging to the Necromancer at this moment. To be precise, it was the most fundamental spell in the Necromancy spell. Resurrection of the Dead. The powerful can sublimate it into a forbidden spell, and the weak can also use it to revive the dead corpse. On the battlefield, corpses crawled up one by one, which not only brought strong mental pressure to the soldiers, but also made the soldiers retreat subconsciously due to their fearless charge. They didn't want to die under the swords of these undead, and they didn't want to become such monsters after death. This is why, even though the Empire has driven away the Church and replaced the status of the supernatural with magic, the Necromancer is still not welcome. Let's not talk about the morale of the enemy. The morale of our side has been reduced to the limit before the war. What are you afraid of? If you can kill them once, can't you kill them a second time? Ryan swung his sword and chopped down, and the undead died again. The burning sword made the shaking undead lose the possibility of getting up again. They are weak. Weaker than when they were alive. Ryan raised his sword and charged forward. The undead army that got up was crushed in front of him. Gradually, the soldiers behind him also regained their courage and charged towards the undead army. Ryan glanced into the distance. Although the undead mage did not have a mage tower, he had a 150-meter-long bone snake under him. After falling from the sky, the opponent stood on the head of the bone snake, causing no one to dare to find an opportunity to kill him. As for assassination? Until now, Ryan didn't know how many cat assassins were still hiding on the battlefield. Could he really assassinate a Sanctuary Necromancer in front of these professionals? But it doesn't matter, the wrath of the giant god is ready. On the side of Count Winter, dozens of mages were blessing the great mage woman headed by him. And a new round of forbidden spells, the wrath of the giant god, came. Count Winter, who was fighting with the Thunder Giant, burst out again at this moment. The absolute power allowed him to face the power of the Thunder Giant head-on. With the assistance of several Sky Knights around him, this time, he was bound to kill the Thunder Giant. Count Weiss, who fell to the ground, had a terrible face. For today's war, he spent countless wealth, and the inheritance from the kingdom was almost squandered by him, but he still failed. The great noble from the Empire, the governor of Count Winter who has controlled the Northwind province for 30 years, has a deeper and more powerful foundation than him. Damn it, I can't lose, Damon. What are you waiting for? Chapter 185 The Holy See appears, going completely crazy. A group of Snow White Knights appeared at the edge of the battlefield. All of them were wearing snow white armor, and so were their horses. The flags swept by the whistling wind had the same logo as the armor, and the wings of the angels were so dazzling. Damon. What are you waiting for? The crazy roar of Count Weiss, coupled with the extraordinary army that appeared in the distance, made everyone look sideways and their pupils shrank. Love. How dare you betray the Empire and collude with the Church? Count Winter shouted loudly. What is the biggest political correctness in the Empire? It is not to support Columbus but to oppose the Church. Any noble is the main force against the Church. This is the biggest political correctness in the Empire. In other words, once you get close to the Church, you are the enemy of all nobles. The lighter case is that the noble will resign and replace an heir. The heavier case is serious, and the noble title will be stripped, and all members will be exiled or even killed. Moreover, now that the Empire and the Church are at war in the Thousand Lakes province, such a big thing has happened in the Northwind province. Once it is known, most of the Count Weiss family will die, and the remaining people will be exiled to a different plane where winter completely shrouds the world of death. Count Winter was extremely angry, and not just him. On the other side, Viscount Hogg was also confused. He never thought that the Church would get involved in this civil war over power and land in the Northwind province. Thinking of this, Viscount Hogg was not feeling well, and his muscles were trembling. Why? Because in the Northwind province today, who has the greatest relationship with the Empire? Who has the deepest relationship with the royal family? Only him, only Viscount Hogg, who married a royal princess, not only occupies the best land in the Northwind province, but also can be said to be the royal family's eyeliner in the Northwind province. Among the 5 nobles of the Empire, the Duke, the Earl, the Viscount, and the Baron, there is a very special title, that is, the Marquess. In the entire Empire, all the Marquesses are members of the royal family, without exception. Every province has a Marquess, which represents the power and eyes of the royal family in that province. But there is no Marquess in the Northwind province, only the governor of Yinchuan County, Viscount Hogg. He can already imagine that when this matter is over, no matter what the result is, he will be held accountable by the royal family. It's over, it's all over, Viscount Hogg thought desperately about the future. Holy Heavenly Knights. Ryan finally understood why this 1,000-man knight left the Wing Canyon after the end of the Imperial City. Everyone thought they were going to the neighboring Andorra Kingdom to follow the Feather Dragon Knight Corps. Unexpectedly, they hid in the Northwind province and reached an agreement with Earl Weiss. As an extraordinary military legion, each extraordinary legion of the Holy See possesses terrible power. Even these Holy Heavenly Knights in front of them look like just a war horse, a set of armor, and weapons, but in fact, they are not simple cavalry. Each of them has been blessed countless times by the priests of the Holy See, and each of them seems to have the power of a dragon imprisoned in their body. Although there are only 1,000 people in the Empire, not the full strength of the Holy Heavenly Knights, but on the battlefield of the Northwind province, they are still a terrifying force. Not only because of the 1,000 Holy Heavenly Knights, but also because of Damon, the leader of the Holy Heavenly Knights, a powerful legend. A true legend. Damon, I will allow the establishment of the Holy See, but you need to get rid of our enemies. Count Weiss has gone crazy. He will never allow this war to fail. The Northwind province belongs to him. Respect your wishes, Lord Count Weiss. Damon performed a standard knight's etiquette, and then the 1,000 Holy Heavenly Knights behind him began to charge. Muir. Stop them. Earl Winter's cold roar resounded on the battlefield. At this moment, Earl Winter's eyes were cold and terrifying. He was the governor of the Northwind province. If Viscount Hogg would be held accountable by the royal family, then Earl Winter would most likely leave the position of governor. And the key point is that if he cannot get rid of this Holy Heavenly Knights, he will be terribly excluded in the circle of the great nobles of the Empire. The Northwind province needs wealth and needs to turn resources into wealth. Earl Winter needs it especially. He will never allow his interests to be damaged, especially when facing the biggest political correctness of the Holy See. After Earl Winter finished speaking, the Flying Wolf cavalry behind him also rushed towards the 1,000 Holy Heavenly Knights. Earl Soren looked at the charge of the Holy Heavenly Knights, and there was a struggle in the depths of his eyes. When Grand Duke Myers of the Empire led the Nightmare Knights to attack the Northwind province, in addition to expanding territory and opportunities, there was also a relationship with the Holy See in secret. As a great noble in this land, he was also facing the dilemma of choice at this moment, but soon, the old knight's eyes became firm. The knight's sword in his hand was unsealed, and it was a legendary weapon. The Fang of Lanalis is actually in your hands. Damon was also very surprised. This knight's sword, which had drunk the blood of the gods in the pan-dimensional war of the gods, now appeared in the Northwind province. The most powerful power of this legendary weapon is that it can raise the owner it recognizes to a higher level. At this moment, the breath of the Holy Land also appeared on Earl Soren's body. He came to the front of the Dragon Blood Warrior Corps, as if he had returned to decades ago. Kill all the church and smash them, Earl Soren roared, and thousands of Dragon Blood Warriors behind him also roared. The Flying Wolf Cavalry Corps and the Dragon Blood Warrior Corps, the 2 extraordinary arms of the Northwind province, launched an attack on the Holy Heavenly Knights. But more than that, Earl Soren looked in the direction of Ryan. Leon, as a noble of Lingdu County, we have the responsibility to start all wars with the church. At the same time, he also aimed at Viscount Hogg. Kill all these knights of the church, and you will be able to explain to the Empire. Viscount Hogg gritted his teeth, but did not make a move. His hope of breaking through the Sky Knights is still in the hands of Count Weiss. If he makes a move at this moment, his soldiers will die in vain. Ryan was silent on the spot. He knew that this was because Count Soren did not want his Dragon Blood Warrior Corps to suffer too much loss. so he called him and Viscount Hogg. As for the other ordinary soldiers, it was meaningless. At this moment, they were still fighting with the undead army and Count Weiss's army. Those low-level soldiers were caught in a chaotic battlefield. How could they tell who was the enemy and who was the friend on the entire battlefield? They could only fight with the people in front of them. Ryan was thinking, but soon he raised the burning sword in his hand. For the glory of the Empire. Chapter 186 The Powerful Extraordinary Legion. The army around Ryan followed on both sides of the Dragonblood Warrior Corps, but when the Dragonblood Warriors in the front collided with the Holy Heavenly Knights, the Flying Wolf Cavalry also arrived here across most of the battlefield in the sky. The huge one-horned Flying Wolf bit violently, and the Flying Wolf Knight behind it stabbed out the 3-meter-long Knight's lance, but the next moment the one-horned Flying Wolf, which was obviously a circle larger, was knocked away. The Knight's lance collided with a long sword in the hands of the Holy Heavenly Knight, but it did not gain much advantage. At the critical moment, the heavy infantry Dragonblood warriors arrived at the battlefield. Their powerful strength and defense could not deal with the Thunder Giants, but they could effectively defend against the attack of the Holy Heavenly Knights. Knock them down, Earl Soren waved the legendary weapon in his hand, and the greatsword fell, tearing a knight and his horse in half. The whole person was like a god of war, so that the knights of the church dared not touch him. With the arrival of the Dragonblood warriors behind them, they assembled into a square formation. At this moment, the horses of the Holy Heavenly Knights who were charging behind them grew a pair of transparent wings on their backs. With a jump, they passed over the heads of the Dragonblood warriors and landed directly in the army led by Ryan in the back. Not only the knights themselves, but even the horseshoes of the Holy Heavenly Knights have received various blessings from the priests. Boom! The Dragonblood warriors turned, and the Flying Wolf Cavalry fell from the sky. When they collided head-on, Ryan finally felt the pressure of the elite extraordinary soldiers of the church. His strength was already very strong, and the long sword burning with fighting spirit and dragon flames in his hand was absolutely sharp, but he still felt that it was difficult to kill even one of them. When his knight's long sword bounced off the weapon in the hands of the Holy Sea Knight with a powerful force and was about to fall on the other side's armor, the silver-white armor suddenly bloomed a layer of barrier. The blessing of the morning light can allow the blessed knight to block 1 to 3 powerful attacks, and at this moment, Ryan's attack was blocked. Is this the extraordinary army of the Holy Sea? Ryan was shocked, and at the same time, his heart became hot. He finally saw the goal he longed for, and hoped that one day, his extraordinary army could also achieve such a level. But at this moment, he also understood that his army might face very scary losses. More than 900 Holy Heavenly Knights rushed into the army of thousands of people. The white armor and horse armor were so dazzling, but soon, the blood of the soldiers was splattered on the snow-white armor. This Holy Heavenly Knights silently killed the soldiers from Lingdu County. Ryan led his elite in a crazy confrontation. The 500 knight attendants finally encountered unprecedented suppression on the front battlefield this time. But it was precisely because of their existence that the Holy Heavenly Knights were dragged down. The Dragonblood warriors turned around and chased after them, and the Flying Wolf Cavalry fell from the sky again, blocking the front of the 1,000 people. At this moment, the most elite 10,000 soldiers of the Northwind province were gathered here. 2 of which were super soldiers, and there were 2 powerful knights, Count Soren and Hora Winter, who finally trapped the 1,000 Holy Heavenly Knights. The horses were charging, but they were dragged by the enemy who was 10 times their number. At least on this battlefield of 10,000 people, there was no scene of soldiers' defeat. Kill them, the Flying Wolf Cavalry was too flexible. The Knights of the Holy Sea could not stop the knights' lances that fell from the sky. The horses under them were pierced one by one. The strong vitality made the horses neigh, and then a snow-white glow appeared on their armor. The great healing technique, the Holy Sea actually solidified their most efficient means of preaching on the warhorse armor of the Holy Heavenly Knights. Perhaps, the Holy Heavenly Knights were not the most powerful super legion of the Holy Sea, but they must be the most favored. The wound closed at a speed visible to the naked eye, but the quagmire of the war allowed the weapons of the Dragonblood warriors and the Flying Wolf Cavalry to penetrate the horses from many corners. In addition, some soldiers from the frozen land would come to attack with the previous heroic spears, which could also pierce the armor of the church. The horses fell one by one. At this time, neither side had the time and qualifications to feel heartbroken. However, as the horses fell, the Holy Heavenly Knights fell to the ground, which made Ryan retract his previous speculation. Is this extraordinary army really not powerful? The solidified great healing technique, at least a dozen famous blessings, plus at this moment, these knights in armor actually grew illusory wings, suspended in the sky several meters high, and instantly cut down hundreds of flying wolf knights from the sky. We will eventually return to the glory of our Lord. Hundreds of holy heavenly knights called out in unison for the faith of the dawn. The sunlight from the sky bathed them. The golden sunlight combined with the silver-white armor made these knights look like angels from heaven. Everyone's eyes were fanatical, and they charged at the enemies around them who were 10 times their number. We must not let them leave. Earl Soren's rebuke made Hora look ugly, but the next moment, he made a decision. The unicorn flying wolf took off into the air, and then gathered in layers above the sky. The leader, Hora Winter, almost trembled as he thrust out the lance in his hand. Charge, for the glory of the Winter family. For the glory of the Empire, smash these Vatican knights and leave them forever on this land. Kill. All the flying wolf cavalrymen rushed towards the holy heavenly knights that rose into the air. The bloody collision even caused the Vatican knights, who had been blessed countless times, to fall from the sky. Similarly, the huge bodies of the flying wolf cavalrymen also fell on the ground like dumplings. In the deep pit, the one-horned flying wolves and knights were gasping for breath. I don't know if they can survive after the war. Finally, the flying wolf cavalry in the sky pressed down the holy heavenly knights and returned to the ground. The dragon blood warriors began to surround and kill these knights frantically. Ryan took the time to look into the distance. He didn't know if Earl Winter would feel heartbroken, but at this moment, the Earl was probably in so much pain that he couldn't care about this side. The appearance of a legendary knight made Earl Winter's barrier retreat. Even with the blessing of the giant god's wrath, he and the surrounding sky knights were not Daemon's opponents. In fact, if it weren't for Earl Winter's noble status, Daemon might have killed Earl Winter. At the same time, Countess Winter on the other side also dropped space mages from time to time. She had gradually suppressed Vane Steel Alchemist, and the alchemist's limbs were almost cut off by the space blade. If the sanctuary mage was given time, she might not be able to keep Daemon, but the problem was that the Countess had no time now. Therefore, Countess Winter had to persevere. Leave them all behind. Ryan waved the burning sword and cut off the wings of a holy heavenly knight. The drifting illusory wings made him feel a little strange, but at this moment, he had no time to care what it was. On the other side, the leader of the holy heavenly knights also glanced at Daemon here, and his eyes widened suddenly. More than half of his subordinates, the believers of the dawn, were already dead or injured, but why didn't the great blessing fall? Chapter 187 Ending and Not Ending. Daemon pulled away. As the only legend on the battlefield, he had absolute freedom and rushed to the battlefield. Behind him, Count Winter and others were blocking him. They certainly didn't want a legendary knight to come and slaughter their extraordinary legions. Why didn't the great blessing fall? Daemon was shocked. The 10 extraordinary legions of the church, especially his holy heavenly knights, represented all the justice and beauty of the church. They were still the most upright believers. When the war losses were too great, the artifacts on the holy mountain would fall on the blessing. No matter where they were or how far away they would receive the blessing and recover all their injuries, increase their strength and speed, and even allow the holy heavenly knights to gather their strength and burst out with a power comparable to that of a legend. But now that more than half of them were killed or injured, the great blessing did not appear. He didn't understand. At this moment, Daemon could no longer accept the fact that there were so many casualties. When the horn sounded, he tried to let his army break through the encirclement and retreat. Can't retreat, I must win this war, Count Weiss roared gloomily. He had paid everything. Once the war failed, he would lose everything. But Daemon couldn't care less now. If the great blessing came, even if it was 1,000 to 10,000, there was still a possibility of victory. But in the current situation, the remaining hundreds of holy heavenly knights were no match for the enemy that was 10 times their number. Those 10,000 people were not slave soldiers, and they were not an army that could be defeated by a charge. If they continued to fight, all the 1,000 holy heavenly knights would stay here. As the power of the legendary knights descended, the earth was shaking, and the violent fighting spirit defeated the army of hundreds of people. Taking advantage of this time, the hundreds of holy heavenly knights finally found a gap and rushed towards the direction of the defeat. Chase them and kill them. Earl Winter and his men had also arrived. A group of powerful knights launched an attack on Daemon, and the remaining army began to chase and kill the hundreds of retreating heavenly knights. It was at this moment that Damon finally stopped holding back and broke out completely. The soaring blood and fighting spirit gathered above his head to form an angel hundreds of meters tall, and the angel dropped the longsword in his hand. Legendary combat skills, the Holy Sword. He was the only one who was left behind. With just one move, he was able to stop the army of 10,000 people who were chasing him. Even Count Winter and Count Soren did not dare to chase them forward. The other side really had the power to kill them. "Retreat, you have lost this war," Damon had to say to Count Weiss, and then he grabbed the other side and fled to the rear. At this moment, the army belonging to Count Weiss finally fell into complete defeat. On the battlefield of Red Wing Plain, tens of thousands of troops began to flee, and the coalition forces of the nobles chased and captured them. "It's finally over," Ryan looked up at the sky. Unknowingly, time had come to dusk. The magic dissipated, and in exchange for the sunset in the sky, the sun's glory fell on the Red Wing Plain, as if it really covered this land with a red gauze. There was no laughter on the battlefield. When the nobles shouted for victory and glory to the Empire, it was a long time to clean up the battlefield. Of course, the rest of the day only allowed them to carry out the dying but still alive people on the battlefield. As for whether they could survive, it all depended on luck. The dead soldiers did not belong to only one noble territory, but each noble territory suffered huge losses. Ryan looked at his army. There were only more than 380 of the 500 personal guards and knights. More than half of the more than 120 dead knights died in the last war. The 1,000 holy heavenly knights were beyond imagination. The weapons of ordinary soldiers needed to break through the defense many times. There were not so many opportunities in the sword fighting. There were only more than 2,170 of the 3,000 elite soldiers of the other nobles in Lingdu County. I don't know how many can be saved on the battlefield. And the war is not over yet. After pacifying his army, Ryan set off for the Earl's mobile fortress. When the extraordinary Legion of the Holy See appeared, the nature of the civil war in the North Wind province had changed. Seeing Earl Soren again, the elderly Earl obviously wanted to return to his previous appearance, which would take a lot of time. There were also Count Winter and the Countess, as well as about 15 or 16 nobles. The arrival of Baron Ryan and Enzo also made the other nobles nod to them. In the war, everyone lost the cumbersome etiquette of the nobles. The Holy Heavenly Knights of the Holy See have appeared, which means that Count Weiss's purpose is not simple at all, Count Winter said in a deep voice. Before, everyone thought that Count Weiss just wanted more resources from the North Wind province and wanted to replace Count Winter as the governor of the North Wind province. After the Empire did not care about the North Wind province, it was indeed possible to make all the nobles compromised through war. At that time, Count Weiss would naturally become the most wealthy noble. But the appearance of the Holy See means that what Count Weiss wants is definitely not just a governor of the North Wind province. He wants to be the king of the North Wind province. Count Soren's eyes were deep, and no one knew what he was thinking, but he expressed the thoughts of all the nobles at the moment. Everyone could think that Count Weiss's plan was not that simple, but they still did not dare to guess in the most frightening direction. "This is something that cannot be allowed, isn't it?" Ryan spoke. When in the final war only his army could cooperate with the two extraordinary legions to fight against the Holy Heavenly Kingdom Knights, Ryan's status was no longer limited to Lingdu County, but a huge change occurred in the entire North Wind province. This is war. War can make the nobles lose everything, but it can also make the nobles have everything. As long as it is strong enough, no one dares to say anything even if the Columbus royal family is brought down. But the question now is whether to tell the Empire about what happened here. Ryan spoke, causing all the nobles to look up at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" Ryan looked at Earl Winter, bowed his head and saluted slightly, then said, "My Lord Earl, if the Empire knows about the situation in the North Wind province, then under the current environment, the Empire will definitely pay attention to it. At that time, the army of the Winged Canyon will go north and enter the North Wind province. We have already occupied an absolute advantage in the war. As long as the news is blocked, all the fruits of victory will belong only to the nobles of our North Wind province. At that time, the flags and bodies of the Holy Kingdom Knights will be transported to the interior of the Empire, and the Empire must also reward us. As far as I know, even in the current war in the Thousand Lakes province, there is no better result than we have today. What I am more worried about now is that the legendary Knight Damon will leave the North Wind province. After all, he is also afraid that if the army of the Winged Canyon goes north to the North Wind province, then not only will all the Holy Kingdom Knights under his command be left behind, but even he himself will most likely be killed in the north. Even if he doesn't leave, our current military strength can crush Earl Weiss, behead first and report later. Earl Weiss colluded with the church and invited the wolf into the house. The nobles of Thundercloud County and Viscount Hua gave Earl Weiss great military and economic support. When the time comes, Ryan did not continue, but all the nobles understood that they could accomplish many great feats that could not be accomplished politically through war. They have the opportunity to occupy the huge wealth of Thundercloud County and the huge wealth of Viscount Hogg in Yinchuan County. If it doesn't work, take down Earl Weiss, imprison all the people in Earl Weiss's family, and then send them to the interior of the empire together with a war report of defeating the church. Bifang Province can also reap a huge amount of benefits. Chapter 188 Spiritual Growth. No cake is too big, and the nobles can devour it. Ryan's proposal itself was within the consideration of these nobles. Their only concern was the legendary Knight Daemon and the 5th Dragon Corps that was said to be in the north. The 5th Dragon Corps dare not appear in the North Wind Province, and even the legendary Knight Daemon, he can't stay in the North Wind Province forever. If he doesn't leave, then we will notify Wing Canyon. According to the bad relationship between the Empire and the Church, I think the legend of Wing Canyon will be very happy to kill a leader of the Holy Heavenly Knights of the Church. If Ryan looked at the two earls. If the two earls are sure to kill Daemon, the credit will belong to the earls themselves, and there is no need for Wing Canyon to divide our wealth again. This matter, of course, could not be decided in one exchange. The meeting ended briefly, and the cleaning of the battlefield continued. Ryan was much more relaxed. First, he came on an expedition, and brought only pure soldiers. Another thing is that his soldiers' uniforms are different from those of soldiers in other counties. It is relatively easy to recognize them if they die on the battlefield, and it is not troublesome to clean up the battlefield. This is not what a noble needs to do. When he was alone, Ryan began to check the strangeness he felt before. Spiritual. 32,850? Ryan stared at his spirituality panel. He remembered very clearly that his spirituality was only more than 10,000 before. Thanks to the population expansion of the frozen land territory and the birth of newborns last winter, his spirituality was slowly increasing. But no matter what, it would not increase so much. It can't be the frozen land territory, then it can only be the church. Ryan remembered very clearly that when he killed those Holy Heavenly Knights, he felt something strange. In other words, his spirituality increased after the death of those extraordinary soldiers. Hundreds of Holy Heavenly Knights increased his spirituality by nearly 20,000. What is the similarity between spirituality and the faith of the church? Ryan was shocked. He couldn't figure it out, but he knew that there were gods in this world. The Lord of the Dawn that the church believes in is not illusory. Even after the Empire drove out the church, Columbus III also combined the royal power and the divine power. Since the gods exist, the church's beliefs cannot be false. Faith is spirituality, Ryan boldly guessed. He couldn't help but be shocked. What on earth did he get? The legendary Knight Daemon said before, it sounds like the Holy Heavenly Knights still have a trump card, but it didn't appear, so I absorbed this spirituality, which made the Holy Heavenly Knights unable to use their trump cards. Ryan swallowed his saliva, but didn't dare to think about it any further. In any case, the growth of spirituality is a good thing. With more than 30,000 spiritualities, if he doesn't care about the cost, he can create more than 3,000 apprentice knights. Of course, the cost cannot be ignored. He doesn't have so many resources. After the blessing of divinity, he can't afford to support more than 3,000 apprentice knights. Thinking about it, Ryan couldn't help but shudder. It will happen, Ryan murmured, and fell into tired sleep. Early the next morning, the nobles gathered together again. This time, all the nobles seemed to have made a decision. Don't report to Wing Canyon and the Empire yet. This is the business of the North Wind Province. Of course, we, the nobles of the North Wind Province, have to solve it ourselves. Earl Weiss colluded with the church and let the wolf into the house. The nobles of the North Wind Province have the responsibility to take him down and hand him over to the Senate for questioning. To put it bluntly, it was the huge territory and resources of Thundercloud County that made these nobles greedy. In particular, Earl Winter made one thing clear. The Winter family will solve the legendary Knight Daemon. Even if they can't kill him, the Winter family has a way to fight a legendary knight, Earl Winter said confidently, giving other nobles great confidence. and this matter was completely decided. When will the war start? Ryan asked. He was reluctant to set off immediately. The war in Red Wing Plain was over, and his army needed to be repaired. Moreover, the huge mineral resources under the land here had not been divided yet. It was impossible for the two Earl families to eat alone, right? Since they were going to attack Thundercloud County next, the two Earls had to share a little. Sure enough, after hearing Ryan's words, many nobles reacted and looked at each other. Their eyes were self-evident. Just now, they faced the Thundercloud County with a common hatred and naturally twisted into a rope, but now faced with huge interests and wealth, these nobles quietly and tacitly cooperated to become the enemies of the two Earls. This is the politics between nobles. No noble will give in to interests. The war will be temporarily set for 1 month later. The two Earls looked at each other. They were naturally unwilling to share Red Wing Plain, but the war broke out here, and the victory did not belong to them personally. The huge army was stationed on the cracked Red Wing Plain. While cleaning up the battlefield, Ryan's soldiers harvested a lot of dragon bones. Of course, these things finally appeared in front of Ryan. The skeleton of a wyvern. In the legend of the Red Wing Plain, the wyvern tribe built nests here. It turned out to be true. Even now, Ryan was still shocked by the iron dragon resurrected by the alchemist. Of course, the wyvern cannot be called a dragon with legendary power when it is an adult. They have no limbs but only 2 feet and 2 wings, but the iron dragon created by the iron alchemist beside Count Weiss already has the power of a dragon. If he is given time, that iron dragon will probably become very scary. Unfortunately, even the iron dragon cannot withstand the forbidden spell released by the space mage carrying the mage tower. No knight dared to touch the space blade storm with his flesh. The magician is worthy of being the only extraordinary system among many extraordinary people that can generally kill enemies across boundaries. Earl Winter is confident that he can deal with a legendary knight. If he hadn't invited another legend to come, then the confidence should come from the Countess. The church used to fight against magicians. The church's army searched the world for magicians and burned them to death. Ryan was sure that the Knight Commander Damon must have the means to deal with magicians. And without long-term preparation, how could the Countess fight against a legendary knight? When Ryan was thinking about a possibility that he couldn't understand, soldiers from the frozen territory came to the Red Wing Plain. "My lord, Master McKen wants you to go back," he said. "It's urgent." Chapter 189, Preliminary Test of Warhorse Breeding. Archmage McKen knew what Ryan was doing, but even though he knew that Ryan was participating in the war, he still wanted him to go back. Then Ryan's eyes gleamed. After handing over the affairs here to Baron Enzo and Brand, Ryan rode his warhorse back to the frozen land territory at full speed. The speed of the light cavalry was no more than 10 people, so he returned to the frozen land territory in 5 days. Beard had not returned yet, but Archmage McKen had prepared what he needed. "Is this sent by Count Pascal?" Ryan got the answer. Only the Count's family closest to the North Wind province could send the utensils and materials he needed so quickly. The Count Pascal family controls a gargoyle army. Do you think gargoyles don't need resources? After the Holy See left the entire empire, Pascal had the highest demand for alchemists. He even used the methods of alchemists to create gargoyle warriors, Archmage McKen said, and then began to urge Ryan. When the plane door opened, the great wizard McKen regained his enthusiasm in his eyes. The world of this wilderness surprised him so much. "I need to prepare the medicine according to the physique and blood of the wild horses here." "You can go." Ryan was speechless. He came back just to be a tool to open the door. However, it was not inconvenient. He got up and left the frozen land again, and returned to the Red Wing Plain a few days later. In the Red Wing Plain, Ryan opened the plane door again and went to the place selected by the great wizard McKen. Yes, it was so convenient. It was a waste of time to go back to the frozen land purely because of the great wizard McKen and those instruments. But there will be so many things in the future. After getting all the equipment, the great wizard McKen no longer plans to leave here, at least for a long time. He is the best horseman in this wilderness, but Ryan is not stingy. He blesses 20 to 30 people from the wilderness tribe of the Swati fairy world and hands them over to the great wizard McKen for training. A method comparable to that of a god. Archmage McKen also recognized Ryan's status as a divine benefactor, and then looked at Ryan with burning eyes. "Why don't you try to bless these wild horses?" Archmage McKen was extremely curious. This method could give ordinary people blood and strength, so what about wild horses? After thinking about it, Ryan followed Archmage McKen to the horse farm. There were already hundreds of tamed wild horses here, each of which was handsome and proud, and they were more cold-resistant than the war horses in the Highlands. Archmage McKen had prepared dozens of mixed potions, some of which were used to feed wild horses, some were injected, and some even needed to be evenly applied to the skin of wild horses. Ryan couldn't understand, but Archmage McKen had already started to operate. There were a total of 28 kinds of magic potions, some of which were cheap, 1 silver coin could make a large pot, and some were extremely expensive. Master McKen, isn't this too expensive? Ryan remembered that the price of a Highland warhorse in the south was only a few dozen or 100 gold coins, but the potions that Master McKen brought out were worth nearly 100 gold coins. For the first time, of course, we have to conduct a comprehensive experiment, regardless of the cost. Otherwise, if we make a mistake in the future training, we will lose tens of thousands of warhorses. Master McKen said unceremoniously, and then his voice softened. After all, the cost of these potions was something that Ryan, a noble, needed to consider. In the first few years of the Highland warhorse, the training of each warhorse was very expensive. It became cheaper little by little later. The number of potions also changed from hundreds of potions to 1 at the beginning, to only 9 key potions now. Do you know where the difference is? Ryan did not respond. Archmage McKen answered seriously and muttered to himself, because later, the offspring of the Highland warhorse began to evolve their blood from generation to generation. Even without the means of royal breeding, the Highland wild horses are stronger than other wild horses and can even be used directly as war horses. Ryan understood that the training cost of the Highland warhorse was also very high in the beginning. The second generation of warhorses after the first generation did not require such a high cost. Similarly, the third and fourth generations, because the Highland warhorse gave birth, naturally had the power that certain potions could bring. So the potions used on the first generation were not necessary on the third and fourth generation warhorses. Saving up little by little, the Highland warhorse, which originally required hundreds of potions, only needed 9 key magic potions to complete the transition from ordinary horses to war horses because of its strong and generous bloodline. Is this the change in cost, or the result of the evolution of life and the change of magic technology? Therefore, after the wild horses on the wilderness became war horses, it would be difficult for Ryan to make a lot of money, at least not in the short term due to cost reasons. While Ryan was thinking, the great wizard McKen had used up all the magic potions. The wild horse standing in place was visibly full of blood and energy. It struggled wildly and howled in pain. The 6 grooms with the physique of trainee knights around held the wild horse tightly, but even so, their suppression was gradually broken free. The wild horse that had broken free from its reins was not a simple matter. The 6 grooms flushed, and they were actually injured by the struggle of the wild horse. No wonder they say that a horse groom needs a knight. Ryan took a breath of cold air, and together with Master McKen, he stared at the wild horse's madness nervously. Now, when the wild horse's pupils dilated and looked a little blood red due to congestion, Master McKen shouted. Ryan did not hesitate, and a horse spirit blessing fell. It was hard to describe, as if the gaze of the gods fell, the wild horse that was struggling wildly calmed down, and even the blood and ki that had been violently surging in its body became extremely quiet. Not enough, not enough. Master McKen reached out and touched the blood that seeped out of the nose of the warhorse, and continued. Ryan pointed out with 1 finger, and 100 spiritual powers fell instantly. At this moment, the pupils of the warhorse began to emit faint blood red and azure light, and the two merged with each other. After about 3 minutes, the extremely quiet warhorse intimately used its head to support Ryan's palm, and Ryan looked at the extremely excited Master McKen. Even when the Highland warhorse is standing, its back is already 2.5 meters high. How come this warhorse looks almost as tall as he is? It's not an instant thing for a warhorse to grow physically, and these potions are just ordinary stuff, not dragon blood. Archmage McKen rolled his eyes at Ryan. If you can get unlimited dragon blood, this warhorse can become the size of a Highland warhorse today. If not, then you can only raise it slowly. Warhorses eat grass and meat. In the breeding of the first generation of warhorses, even magical beast meat and hay soaked in extraordinary potions or wild grass with magic are needed. Only in this way can the warhorse grow taller and bigger little by little, and become as terrifying as the Highland warhorse. Natural growth is impossible, and it will take a long time. You'd better get more extraordinary materials, or power related to dragons, dragon blood, etc. Archmage McKen didn't force it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190 Commanding the Armies. Ryan left the wilderness and returned to Redwing Plain. The blood, endurance and physique of a warhorse are not created out of nothing. A large amount of food is needed to stimulate the birth, and a large amount of magic potions are needed to cultivate it bit by bit to become a warhorse. According to the great wizard McKen, Ryan had a headache. Money, 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 all money. With materials of 1,000 gold coins, a first-generation warhorse can be cultivated in 1.5 years. With 10,000 gold coins, it can be cultivated in half a year. With 30,000 gold coins, it can be cultivated in half a month. From the details, Ryan can probably understand that when the royal family cultivated the Highland warhorse, the initial investment must have been terrible. The wealth worth countless gold coins stabilized the bloodline of the Highland warhorse. After 10 or 20 years, it would be pure harvest. It would not require too much money to spend. The warhorse would grow up on its own and become a Highland warhorse after adulthood. The royal family's Highland warhorse was probably outstripping its income in the first 10 years. The longer the time, the more wealth the Highland warhorse would bring. Ryan had a toothache. He finally understood why the royal family did not allow the great wizard McKen to sign a contract with the great nobles. With such a price and such an initial investment, the small nobles could not afford it. Only the great nobles with real power, especially the 4 Grand Dukes. The royal family did not want to see the great nobles in the empire share the warhorse market with them. But is it really not there? Highland warhorses are unique within the empire. It's not that other people can cultivate warhorses, but other people can only rely on magicians to cultivate a few or a dozen warhorses sporadically, which is not universal. In other words, there is no way to cultivate them on a large scale. And they are more inclined to the aspect of warcraft, not warhorses that anyone can ride. Those great nobles can't do it either, so the annual sales of Highland warhorses are terrible. There are magic potions to castrate them, and even breeding is impossible. But Ryan doesn't believe it. Although the Empire only trades Highland warhorses on the surface, what about secretly? Do those great nobles really have no means to cultivate a kind of warhorse in batches? The reason why Ryan made such a suspicion is because of the other world. Now he knew that both Count Winter and Count Weiss had mastered a different world plane. This was a world that they controlled alone, and no one knew what they were doing in that different plane. Just like Ryan trained warhorses on the plains of Svediferi, who said that the great nobles couldn't do it? If that's the case, then the great nobles of the Empire are probably more powerful than I thought. The war in Redwing Plain made Ryan a little bit floating. Now thinking carefully, he finally calmed down. No wonder Count Winter and Count Soren didn't think of attacking Thundercloud County at the beginning. They were worried about what cards Count Weiss had in that different plane, Ryan thought to himself, and then went to the military camp to train the army. Excluding the wounded, there were only more than 2,200 soldiers who could still fight. Each of them was the most elite veteran. Not to mention anything else. As long as these soldiers returned to Lingdu County alive, they were all qualified to become the wealthy class in each noble territory. The merits and wealth brought by the war could change their family for generations. Ryan looked at the 2 extraordinary legions. Among the Redwing Plains army, he was confident that except for these 2 legions, all the remaining armies were not his opponents. This was a head-on fight with the same number of troops, and his army would definitely win every battle. After all, the quality of these armies from the 2 counties did not seem to be that high. Lord Baron Ryan, Lord Earl invites you to discuss matters. With the arrival of the Flying Wolf Cavalry, Ryan went to the mobile fortress of Earl Solon, where Earl Winter was also. Lord Earl, Ryan, sit down. There were only 3 nobles here, and the 2 earls also directly stated their decisions. 10 days later, the Redwing Plains army will enter the Thundercloud County, and we plan to hand over the army to you to command. In the entire Northwind province, there is no one more suitable than you to command this war. Me. Ryan narrowed his eyes slightly. Of course, he did not have the idea of being modest, but was considering the benefits involved. And his right to speak in front of the 2 earls. It can be said that as long as he becomes the commander of these tens of thousands of troops, if the war is won, what he can get will definitely not be much less than the 2 earls. It can even be said that he will be the only 3 nobles who eat meat after the victory of the war. Are these 2 so kind? But soon, Ryan understood. The invasion of orcs, the Lord's Land War, the war in Red Wing Plain at the end of last year and not long ago, the winter blizzard, the spring plowing, these factors, in fact, even if only one of them appears, it is a huge loss for the nobles' territory. If added together, even these 2 earls can't bear it. In the war to attack Thundercloud County, they don't want the army to lose too much, so inevitably, they need to find a commander with strong military talent to command the army. After discussing, Ryan is the only choice. Thinking of this, Ryan's mouth corners rose slightly. In this way, he can put forward many conditions. In the evening of the same day, after the nobles gathered, Ryan's position as the commander-in-chief was completely decided. So early the next morning, Earl Soren's mobile fortress became Ryan's residence. Of course, it was temporary. The flags of the 3 earls and the flag of the frozen land territory were planted on the fortress, and they fluttered in the wind. He stood on it and determined the troops in various directions through the continuous reports of the Flying Wolf cavalry. But at this moment, Ryan also felt extremely tired. There was no way. To command an army of tens of thousands of people was not just to command them to go to the battlefield. Let Lord Fran, Lord Carrizo, and Lord Arietta stop training. A total of 9,200 people will be responsible for logistics. Ryan did not intend to let the hastily gathered slave soldiers go to the battlefield even if there were tens of thousands of them. Give them all the shovels and axes of the army, and be responsible for marching in front and clearing the way, and transporting food and grass in the rear of the army. Order the 2,000 soldiers led by the knight under Baron Yeager to move to the border between Red Wing Plain and Thundercloud County, and order, as Ryan's orders continued to fall, until a day passed, the entire Red Wing Plain army barely became what he wanted. The army was divided into 3 parts, the front, middle and back armies. The front army consisted of half of the slave army and 2,000 regular troops, a total of 6,500 people. The back army consisted of 4,000 slaves responsible for transporting food and armaments and 6,000 regular troops. The last middle army was the main force of Ryan's attack on Lyon County, with a total of 30,000 soldiers. As for the remaining 1,000 or 2,000 soldiers, Ryan asked them to take care of the wounded. It was just such a simple command at the beginning, and the problems that followed made Ryan feel extremely troubled. The most direct one was the dissatisfaction of those nobles. Chapter 191, March into Thundercloud County. The military forces of Bifang County, Longshan County, and Lingdu County were all gathered here. It is conceivable how many noble members there are. Those noble members represent the barons and viscounts behind them, and even 2 earls. After Ryan spent a day dividing the army into the front, middle and back armies, the army of Lingdu County was fine. After all, they were all around him, but the other nobles were like a pot of boiling water. Baron Ryan, why is my army walking in the front, and you took away the weapons of my soldiers, and only gave them axes and shovels? Baron Ryan, my army has always been in charge of the left wing, why should it walk in the front? Baron Ryan, my army is not my family's army, but is composed of the soldiers of 3 barons and lords. Looking at the several nobles who were roaring in front of him, Ryan's eyes were indifferent. Slave soldiers are not suitable for the battlefield. It is best to use them to open roads, repair bridges, dig pits, fill manure, and clean the battlefield. Ryan ignored Lord Fran's flushed face and looked at another noble. The transportation of food and grass faces the greatest pressure. If you want to go to the battlefield, keeping the food and grass is the greatest credit. Even the people responsible for suppressing the civilians and slaves in the noble territory of Lyon County to prevent riots will be drawn from your hands. We entered Lyon County from Red Wing Plain. It was flat all the way. What difference does it make whether it is the left wing or the right wing? The enemy may rush into our army from anywhere, and Ryan explained patiently, but he only explained it once. Lord Arietta looked unhappy. Of course, the soldiers he led could not be just the army of one noble, but a union of many nobles. Of course, he was dissatisfied with Ryan asking him to be responsible for transporting food and grass. Everyone knows that they are attacking Thundercloud County now. Earl Wise has been defeated by them. Entering Thundercloud County means a lot of military merits and wealth. If he can't get enough benefits, he doesn't know how to explain to those nobles when he returns. But just as he opened his mouth to refute, Ryan had already stood up. The powerful spirit of the Silver Knights oppressed him, and his eyes were like a dragon staring at the Lord. If you don't accept it, I will change someone to be responsible for the food and grass now. Guard the food you are responsible for. If there is any mistake, military law will be imposed. After saying that, Ryan's voice also slowed down. If the attack goes smoothly and you ensure that the food and grass are not lost, this credit may not be in the top 10. After Ryan finished speaking, Lord Arietta in front of him lit up. In the previous discussion, Ryan had the right to decide the credit after the victory of the war. To be precise, it was to record which nobles had made greater contributions in the war. This involved the final division of interests, which was a concession made by the two earls to Ryan. Then, the army will enter Lyon County in a few days. What are you still doing here? Ryan then used carrots and sticks to drive the other nobles out of the mobile fortress. Looking at the backs of these nobles leaving, Ryan smiled in his heart. If they can keep the food and grass safe, not to mention the top 10, it is not impossible to be in the top 5. But the problem is that there are not only 2 or 3 families responsible for the safety of food and grass. In addition to the slave soldiers, there are also 6,000 regular troops. Among the 6,000 soldiers, almost every noble in Bifang County and Longshan County has a share. No matter how great the merit is, it is nothing to share a share. Swati Ferry, on the Wilderness, the Horse Farm Research Institute of the Great Wizard Maken. After arranging the army for 3 consecutive days, Ryan finally had time to come here to visit the warhorse he had been thinking about. You have grown a lot taller. Ryan looked at the wild horses in the horse farm, and then blessed them one by one. Each one was blessed with 30 spirituality. Although the spirituality was much more abundant, he still couldn't bless each one with hundreds of spirituality. It actually works. Can all wild horses be blessed like this, or can only the wild horses in this world and on this field be blessed? Ryan thought it was the latter, because he had tried to bless those Highland war horses. The effect was minimal. In 3 to 5 years at most, the first generation of war horses will be able to grow up. If you can buy more magic potions, the speed can continue to increase. In the data given by the Great Wizard Maken, Ryan certainly couldn't spend hundreds or thousands of gold coins on each horse just to speed up the growth of the war horses. Even if he wanted to, he didn't have the time to transport the magic potions. No hurry, it's still too expensive, Ryan said. If possible, he was unwilling to spend this money. The consumption was too high. According to a year ago, many barons only earned a few thousand gold coins a year. Even if they were squandering, they wouldn't be squandering like this. If you are not a noble, it's really hard to play in the high-end market of war horses. If everything goes well, I can get some land after the war, and that land can be used to grow potions. Potions grown by oneself will definitely be much cheaper than those bought directly with money. When magicians encounter such things, the first thing they think of is to buy them with money, but Ryan is a nobleman who owns land. He is more keen on production than consumption. This is the difference in thinking between him and the Great Wizard Maken. After all, as a magician, the Great Wizard Maken has no territory and can only obtain materials by purchasing. In this way, a large amount of gold coins can be saved and can be used in more needed places. Very satisfied with the 51st generation war horses in the horse farm, Ryan returned to the Red Wing Plain. The army of tens of thousands of people still could not be used as he wished. In a few days, he was only able to simply control the coalition forces of the 3 counties. Finally, time was getting closer and closer to the day of the attack. Let the front army enter Thunder Cloud County and be stationed in 2 parts of the lake 10 miles south and east of Twilight Territory. They will mine trees to forge toilets. They must prepare enough of them before the army arrives. The rear army will send 3,500 soldiers to escort food and grass, follow the front army, and station them in the south of Twilight Territory. The army finally began to attack Thunder Cloud County. The tens of thousands of troops marched in an orderly manner, bringing oppression, as if dark clouds covered the sky and thunder roared in it. At this moment, not only the nobles, but also the 2 earls who stayed in their respective extraordinary legions were shocked to see this scene. They had never thought that the army could move forward like this. How did they do it before? The great nobles arranged it, and the small nobles each took their own army, and then it was done. But now, after integrating tens of thousands of troops from 3 counties, even though the march was still messy, and some soldiers even walked to the ranks of other armies, they were still shocked, as if a giant dragon was crawling on the ground and moving slowly. The 30,000 soldiers in the Central Army were not advancing very fast. This was the speed Ryan had calculated based on his observations over the past few days. Even the soldiers with the worst quality could catch up with the main force. If there was no chaos, this army would be strong enough. Chapter 192 The Final War. The territory of Twilight is a barony, but until now, no nobles have been enfeoffed in this territory, just like the territory of Tundra before, which has not waited for its owner to appear. However, unlike the territory of Tundra, even if there is no lord here, there are thousands of people living here, and they are not poor. Because the terrain of Thundercloud County is not steep, most of the land is flat, and there are a lot of streams and dark rivers here. Every night, the bright moon in the sky shines down, shining on the streams to form sparkling waves, which makes this place have the name of Twilight. Yes, the rivers here are different from those in the Tundra territory, and they are not frozen. Along the way, Ryan envied it very much. In such a territory, even if the nobles do nothing, they can live a worry-free life. A large army appeared in the territory of Twilight, and no civilian in the entire Twilight town dared to come out. Through some mess, Ryan could also tell that it seemed that the soldiers of the front army had entered the town once. After all, he couldn't control all the nobles and soldiers. Brand, tell our soldiers that no one can enter the town without orders. Yes, Brand, wearing ferocious armor, rode a warhorse and followed Ryan's mobile fortress, listening to Ryan's continuous knowledge of leading troops. After coming to the frozen land territory from the initial tribe hunting kid, Brand has matured a lot. In addition, past the order to the entire army, no one can enter the town of Twilight. There are no enemies who betray the Empire here. The army made a brief stop in the south of the Twilight territory. Earl Winter commanded the Flying Wolf Cavalry to go south from the sky to check the situation in Thundercloud County. The army of tens of thousands of people entered Thundercloud County. As long as the nobles here are not blind, deaf or stupid, they will definitely not be unaware. The war will not break out little by little, nor will it break out in the territory of the nobles. Ryan looked at the map, which was a new map that he asked Earl Winter to compile in just a few days. He looked at the front of his army, the place called Leine Gorge. There, he prepared a tomb for Earl Weiss's army. Leine Gorge, looking from above, looks like a grassy field with a cut in it, narrow on both sides and wide in the middle, more than 20 miles long, and about 300 to 450 meters wide in the middle. However, Leine Gorge is not very deep. Standing on both sides and looking down, you can see that the valley bottom is overgrown with weeds and has not been taken care of at all. There are 3 ways to cross Leine Gorge. One is to go around it, but it is too far. There is a big river where you usually go around, so most people will not do this. The second way is to go directly down and then come up from the other side. It is only a few hundred meters wide and a few dozen meters deep. Just treat it as a mountain road. This is also the way most people who walk through Leine Gorge do. You only need to worry about the insects and poisonous snakes inside. The third way is not so conventional. There are extraordinary people in this world. Since there are extraordinary people, if you encounter such a difficult road, let the power of extraordinary people change it. This has nothing to do with Ryan. The nobles have gathered together the mages who can use earth magic. As long as he needs it, he can let these mages build a bridge on the Leine Gorge at any time for tens of thousands of troops to pass. However, Ryan did not intend to go there. This was the battlefield he carefully selected. The reason why there is no lord in the Twilight territory is probably related to this place. It is too far away from other territories in Leine County, and it is not close to Longshan County or Bifang County. There was nothing in the Red Wing Plain before, and no one would go there. Naturally, it is difficult for the Twilight territory to connect with other territories, and the Twilight territory has not yet discovered the existence of land resources such as iron ore. Only one day has passed, and Count Weiss's army has appeared on the opposite side of the Leine Gorge. But the number is a little small. Less than 10,000, riding on the Flying Wolf. Ryan almost saw at a glance that the number of soldiers under Count Weiss would not exceed 10,000. Moreover, most of them were wearing animal skins, and they didn't seem to be people from the Empire at all. Is it from that world? Ryan thought so. Obviously, the other nobles in Thundercloud County also knew that the Holy Heavenly Knights appeared on the battlefield of Red Wing Plain, and they still stood on the side of Count Weiss. Count Weiss was crazy and desperate to collude with the church, but the other nobles did not have such an idea, and they would never dare to have such an idea. After the army returned to Thundercloud County, The nobles had a big quarrel and finally left unhappily. All the nobles turned their backs on Count Weiss. They did not want the army of Wing Canyon to appear at their doorstep. Love, surrender. Count Winter rode on the flying wolf in the sky and shouted, while on the opposite side, Count Weiss, with a gloomy look in his eyes, stared at the army here. He would never surrender. Never, he roared in a low voice, and then looked at Damon next to him. I must win the war. The church wants to preach in the Empire, and you only have the only chance in the Northwind Province. What about the Feather Dragon Corps? Can they be called? As long as the Feather Dragon Corps can arrive, the Flying Wolf Cavalry and the Dragon Blood Warriors will not be a problem. He can defeat all the nobles in the Northwind Province with overwhelming force. Impossible, Damon shook his head. The Feather Dragon Corps will not appear in the Empire, otherwise the Extraordinary Corps of the Wing Canyon will also go north. You haven't seen the army of the Wing Canyon yet because these nobles want to annex your territory. Although Damon is not a noble, he has a clear idea of Count Winter and others. Weiss certainly knows that if the previous war determined the division of wealth, then when the Church's legion appeared on the battlefield, the noble's ideas have changed from pure wealth to his territory. It is precisely because of this that he has no way out. He must win the war, and it is not even as simple as winning the war. He needs more support from the Church. If I become the king of the North Wind, the Feathered Dragon Legion and the army of the Andorra Kingdom can be stationed here. Count Weiss took a deep breath and said, no ruler would like to see other people's armies stationed on his own land, but he has no choice now. Damon glanced at Count Weiss. He felt that this man was crazy to the extreme, but he did not say it out loud. Because this would be of great benefit to the Church's erosion of the Empire. No matter how unpopular the Northwind Province is, it is still one of the provinces of the Empire. If the faith of the Church can be spread, it will be a huge blow to the Empire. I will try. Chapter 193 The Final War. Ryan fell to the ground. When he fell from the Flying Wolf Cavalry, a chill ran through the shadows under his feet. Hell, I've been waiting for you, Ryan said in a low voice, and the agile stag steps under his feet flashed. The rapier was easily staggered by him, and then the palm covered with the mithril armor directly grabbed the cat assassin, who rushed out of the shadow. Under the huge force, the cat assassin's neck was tightly pinched, and the face covered with cat hair was flushed with blood. Humph. It's really omnipresent. Lock him up. He threw it to Brand and others who came over in shock and anger, and Ryan returned to the mobile fortress. Since he was assassinated on the battlefield last time, he has felt the power of these cat assassins and will never let down his guard at any time. These assassins Count Soren appeared at some point. He looked at the cat assassin who was taken away, and I don't know what he was thinking in his eyes. Very powerful and mysterious. I wonder where Count Weiss got these guys from, Ryan said. In his opinion, the threat of these cat assassins was not much less than that of the Black Oat Man. How do you plan to fight this war? Count Soren asked, changing the subject. He was very curious. Now the two sides were distributed on both sides of Lion Gorge. The pit of several hundred meters in the middle blocked the two sides. The group of magicians were ready and could release magic to create 10 bridges on this Lion Gorge. When two sides meet on a narrow road, the brave will win. After Ryan finished speaking, his eyes fell on the soldiers next to him. The next moment, the ancient horn sounded, and the magicians in the central army placed the magic crystals around them. While chanting in unison, the majestic magic power in the sky began to gather. This is magic. Ryan was amazed as he watched the earth yellow light rise above the ground, and then these lights connected to Lion Gorge. As the light dimmed, stone bridges appeared one after another. Cater, Pruitt, lead your army to attack, Ryan gave an order, and 10,000 soldiers were divided into 10 groups and stepped onto the bridge and rushed to the opposite side. At the same time, Earl Weiss also ordered the army to charge. Is this Ryan stupid? He couldn't help but wonder. Not only him, but Damon next to him could also see it. The difference in the number of troops on both sides is so big, isn't it relying on numbers to win? Now that 10 bridges have appeared, Ryan's army has completely lost its advantage in numbers. On Earl Weiss's side, although there are not many barbarians left, it is not impossible to stand on the bridge alone. They can completely defeat the army of tens of thousands of people with this method. The moment the war broke out, the nobles on both sides couldn't help but wonder whether Baron Ryan had surrendered to Earl Weiss and why he chose such a decision. This is also the reason why Earl Soren appeared beside Ryan, and he also brought several nobles with him. Ryan, what on earth do you want to do? If this goes on, Our soldiers will suffer heavy losses, some nobles couldn't help but scold. Most of their tens of thousands of troops can only watch here. The magic of those magicians can't fill up the Lion Gorge. If this goes on, Earl Weiss's 10,000 men can easily defend our attack. I know, Ryan said calmly. Indeed, if it were a normal person, when there is an advantage in numbers, it would be impossible to choose such a command, abandon their numerical advantage, and meet the opponent head-on. This is often a template of using the few to defeat the many and the weak to defeat the strong. But after the war in Red Wing Plain, Ryan's ideas have changed a lot. What kind of world is this? This is a world with extraordinary power. Earl Weiss does have extraordinary soldiers such as barbarians, and the remaining savages wearing animal skins seem to be particularly majestic, but the barbarians have been almost consumed in Red Wing Plain, and this is the biggest problem. And what about Ryan? They have the military power of 3 counties, in other words, they have the extraordinary power of 3 counties. Compared with quantity? Are the barbarians and knights under Earl Weiss more numerous than the knights under Ryan? Yes, knights are Ryan's trump card in this war. Those knights who are strong enough to lift a cow and run are the powerful creatures on this bridge. You want to fight a war and bring it to the castle of Earl Weiss's territory, but what I want is a war to defeat this Earl. Ryan narrowed his eyes slightly. It was not easy for him to command a large number of knights. How could he give up? Of course, there is another key reason. That is food. He has tried many ways to get the food and the logistics into his own pocket. So he must end the war quickly to turn the surplus food into rations for the frozen land. No one has noticed Ryan's means yet. It can only be said that the 2 earls gave up too much power after choosing Ryan as the commander. Brand, Ryan roared, and Brand next to him had already walked out fully armed. He did not ride a war horse. Including the 600 knights behind him who were at least formal knights, they all appeared next to Ryan's mobile fortress in the form of infantry. When Earl Solon next to him was a little shocked. Although he had also felt a mobilization of his troops in the past few days, when did all the knights appear here? He looked at Ryan in shock. How long has it been? Ryan has only been the commander for more than 10 days. In such a short time, how did he hide it from all the nobles and mobilize these knights here? These nobles can even see that many of these knights belong to them and are loyal to them. They know nothing. Of course they know nothing. There are nearly 50,000 troops. Even Ryan feels that many places cannot be seen clearly when he commands. How can they, who are in it, see the mobilization and movement of 50,000 people? Where are your soldiers? Earl Solon couldn't help asking. Ryan also has his own army, from Lingdu County and Ryan's own knights and attendants. They originally guarded the side of this mobile fortress. Before, there were also nobles making trouble because Ryan's army could get great credit without going to the battlefield. My soldiers? Of course, they are to take care of the food. Ryan naturally would not say that, but said, they have other tasks. Earl Soren fell silent, because he also knew that their army, the front army of nearly 10,000 people, was not here, but in another place in Lion Gorge. They had to go from there to the opposite side and flank Earl Weiss's army from both sides. At this moment, Earl Soren also felt that he could not understand it. This was completely different from the wars of their nobles before. There were skills. Chapter 194 The Final War. Brand was very strong. Even Ryan, who had practiced the 3 breathing techniques to the level of a Silver Knight, was not very sure that he could beat Brand, who was also a Silver Knight. Brand, who was favored by the will of the Deer Spirit, had an incredible strength of blood and physique, which completely surpassed the Silver Knight, but did not reach his own limit. When he led the 600 knights to rush onto the bridge created by the magicians, the soldiers in front had already fallen into the Lion Gorge like dumplings. In fact, this was what Ryan needed. As long as he fell down, even if he didn't die, as long as he was alive, they would not be able to escape after the war. These were all high-quality populations. Lion Gorge was the cage that held them. They only needed to wait for the war to end. Boom! The knight's long sword fell on the barbarian, and the huge force made the barbarian's chest dent. Brand did not stop at all. He kicked the barbarian who was not dead yet, making him fall to the side, and then fell with another barbarian at his feet. At a height of dozens of meters, even if he rolled down, he was afraid that 80% to 90% of them would not survive. Kill, there is no way out. Either fall down, be killed, or kill them. Meeting on a narrow road, all the soldiers were inspired to move forward fearlessly. They could only move forward. Behind them were a large number of soldiers who made it impossible for them to retreat. On both sides were cliffs dozens of meters high. Falling down would generally result in death, and generally in disability. Only by moving forward, killing the enemies in front of them, and stepping on the opposite land could they survive. The soldiers' bloodiness and lack of choice narrowed a gap between them and those sturdy barbarians. Barbarians do not have such rich emotions. Even in such an extreme Jedi, they do not feel much with the ground. It is precisely because of this that they can hardly have the crazy emotions of the soldiers, who have no choice but to gamble everything. The power of emotions is strong. When the soldiers charge forward fearlessly, the barbarians are not so strong. And gradually, when the knights came to the front, the barbarians were already tired and their reaction speed was not so fast. Even with strong power, they could not pose a fatal threat to the knights. Kill! The knight's sword came out from the side, pierced the barbarian's armpit, and pierced through the shoulder. Then, with great force, the knight's sword swept across a trace of blood, and the barbarian's arm was cut off. Taking advantage of the victory, another knight next to him rushed forward amid the barbarian's painful roar, as terrifying as a wild bull, and his shoulder directly hit the barbarian. The tall barbarian fell backwards and had no chance to stand up. The soldiers swarmed over and poked holes in his spears. A bridge can only allow 5 to 7 people to walk side by side. Now the knights have the upper hand, so naturally, reminding the larger barbarians will not be able to support the barbarians in front. The advantage of meeting on a narrow road has completely tested these hundreds of knights. The nobles found it difficult to understand, and Earl Weiss also couldn't understand it. He didn't understand that the barbarians, who were obviously more powerful, shouldn't they be able to block the way on the bridge alone? Even those knights. Wouldn't they be afraid to act because of the narrow terrain and difficult to dodge when facing the power of the barbarians? Why does it seem like the situation is one-sided now? Count Weiss didn't understand why the barbarians were defeated so quickly, but the legendary knight next to him saw something. They are cooperating. In his eyes, those knights were not fighting alone, but 3 or 5 people were cooperating. For a knight fighting in the front, there must be 2 knights assisting from the side, and 2 knights suppressing with sharp blades from behind. The barbarians seemed to be facing only one person and a few ordinary soldiers, but in fact, those knights wearing the same armor as the soldiers were also hidden among them. The sudden burst of power was too much for the barbarians to bear. Very exquisite skills, Count Weiss couldn't help it. If this continued, his army would be completely defeated. He looked at Damon. Your knights know. Before he finished speaking, he was rejected by Damon. The Holy Heavenly Kingdom knights need mounts, and the mounts on the bridge can only act as a meat shield. My knights will lose most of their power. He couldn't let the knights of the church enter such a battlefield to make meaningless sacrifices, and the extraordinary legions of Count Winter and Count Soren had not yet appeared. Count Weiss fell silent. He looked to the other side, where no one was allowed to enter. It was the location of the Holy Land Necromancer. Damn Ryan, Count Weiss roared like a beast. He could see that the battlefield on the bridge almost abolished all the necromancer's means. Even if the necromancer could revive the dead and continue to fight, the resurrected undead soldiers were all in the Lion Gorge below. How could they fight the enemies above their heads? Moreover, when they climbed up the Lion Gorge, which was dozens of meters high, they would be greeted by spears falling from their heads. There were 20,000 troops waiting in full battle array. If the undead army rushed up like this, they would be killed again if they could not kill any enemy. The alchemist's means would not work unless Vane took the field himself. But in this case, just like the Thunder Giant, the high-end combat power would be locked and would not affect the battlefield at all. Around him, the extraordinary combat power of the 2 holy domains was useless, and the Thunder Giant could not destroy the war. If the Thunder Giant fell into the tens of meters high Lion Gorge, his Count Weiss dared not imagine that, in that case, even without Count Winter and those Sky Knights, the Thunder Giant would be chopped off by the densely packed soldiers' spears and knight swords. That's right, from the beginning, Ryan considered the extraordinary means of both sides the most. When ordinary soldiers face ordinary armies, they can reflect the advantages of tactics, but when facing extraordinary forces, they will be easily decided by the latter. As a noble and commander, he needs to consider his own interests and how to win the war. Only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you win every battle. He wants to target all the extraordinary means around Count Weiss. Therefore, the battlefield was set in Lion Gorge. Even if Count Weiss's army did not arrive here, He did not take the opportunity to cross over and fight with the other side on the plain, because this is the tomb he prepared for Count Weiss. In fact, the only chance for Count Weiss to win was the battle on the bridge, but the problem also appeared here. Barbarians don't have much brains. It is difficult for them to cooperate with each other. On the contrary, the knights have advantages in all aspects except strength. Chapter 195 The Final War. Ryan couldn't actually command this army of tens of thousands of people. After more than 10 days of running in, he knew very well that he had never had such experience and could not turn tens of thousands of troops into a powerful fighting force. But he could command a small number of troops, which was enough. Knights, a small number of soldiers, and the decision-making of the general direction were the truth of this war that was completely different from other nobles. He asked the soldiers to fight on the bridge. The frontal fight was to see who was stronger. This had nothing to do with command, but with knights. He asked the remaining soldiers to line up in full force to bring a blow to the morale of the opponent. Strictly speaking, this was a strategy and had nothing to do with command. Similarly, at this moment, the front army of the army, which was thousands of meters away from the battlefield, crossed the Leine Gorge and prepared to attack the soldiers of Earl Weiss from both sides. The strategy also accounted for more. When two people meet on a narrow road, the brave will win. Ryan looked at the tragic battlefield of 10 bridges and ordered the magicians to open 3 more stone bridges. "I can't do it," the magicians cried. "The magic power in their bodies has been exhausted. You have to know that the 10 stone bridges are not simple stone bridges. They are maintained by magic power. Otherwise, with so many soldiers, so many knights and barbarians fighting on them, the stone bridges would have been cut off by the huge force if they were ordinary. Until now, the stone bridges are intact. The barbarians' giant axes can only burst out some broken stones when they fall on them. The magic power required to build such stone bridges is not simple." Forget it, Ryan didn't care. He wanted to build a few more stone bridges to drag more of Count Weiss's soldiers to fight on the bridges, because according to the time, the army behind them was about to arrive, and they might be under a lot of pressure. The main reason was that Ryan didn't know there would be so many soldiers wearing animal skins like savages before he saw Count Weiss's army. They were very strong. Boom! Across the Leine Gorge, Count Weiss and his men suddenly looked back. They didn't know when a large army appeared behind them. The banners in the army were obviously not reinforcements from him or the nobles of Leine County, but the enemy on the opposite side. Damn it, they came around. What is the role of the front army? They have all the tools of the army in their hands. Their role is to open the way. When they encounter mountains, they open the way. When they encounter water, they build bridges. When they encounter terrain like Leine Gorge, they also climb down little by little, clear the weeds, and deal with the beasts or insects and snakes in it, so as to clear a way for the army to climb down from this side and climb up from the other side. At this moment, Ryan's sudden idea of a surprise army finally became the last straw that overwhelmed the morale of Count Weiss's army. In addition to the barbarians, there are more soldiers of Count Weiss, those warriors wearing animal skins. Tens of thousands of people, almost all of them are these warriors, so that Ryan is wondering where the regular troops in the territory of Count Weiss have gone. But it is not difficult to guess. Near the Twilight Territory, the earth was rumbling and shaking. And there were iron hooves trampling, followed by thousands of soldiers rushing towards the logistics camp. Harrington looked at the arrival of the army in the distance, and a large number of cavalry were approaching them. There was no flag of Viscount Hogg, but he was sure that the cavalry came from Viscount Hogg. Even now, Viscount Hogg has not given up on Earl Weiss. Harrington was a little surprised. He didn't understand why, but he understood one thing. His eyes were full of loyalty and awe for Ryan. Master Ryan is right. After withdrawing to Thundercloud County, Earl Weiss will definitely leave an army to destroy the food and grass, but the number is so large. But Harrington didn't care. Everything was within Master Ryan's calculations. Although Viscount Hogg was an accident, this war would never be a long-lasting war, so it was no big deal if the food was burned. What's more, there is not much food here. Harrington was a little excited. It was the first time for him to do such a thing. They had been secretly transporting food out these days. Even the slaves outside Lindu County didn't understand where he sent the food. Let them in and let them add fuel to the fire. Viscount Hogg looked at the camp in front of him, his eyes full of gloom and struggle. Count Weiss colluded with the church, and he should have changed his position immediately and become the enemy of Count Weiss. But Centaur Potion, Viscount Hua grabbed the reins tightly. No matter what the result was, as long as he completed this task, he would be able to get the magic potion for promotion to Sky Knight. Although he had not reached that step yet, it would be the most uncomfortable if he really reached that step but had no resources. He believed in his talent, otherwise he would not be valued by the royal family and married a royal woman. Done. Viscount Hug thought he was a humble person. He was good at learning from other strengths, so when he was defeated by Ryan with fire in Tishan County before, he also felt the advantages brought by fire in several subsequent wars. Charge. Viscount Hug did not charge directly into the camp, but led the cavalry to attack from the side. As for the frontal attack, of course, it was left to the soldiers under Count Weiss. He was worried about traps. In fact, there were indeed traps, but they were not outside or on the edge of the camp. The cavalry and infantry rushed into the camp, and the torches with kerosene instantly ignited all the tents. The burning speed was so fast that Viscount Hug was a little shocked. His torch was thrown far away, but it spread to his vicinity in a few seconds, causing the warhorse to dare not move forward. How could it be so easy? Viscount Hug turned his horse's head and went to the other side where it had not spread yet. The knight's long sword tore open the tent. No, how could there be no, my lord Viscount, those grain carts are all hay, hay. How could it be hay? Where did they get so much hay? Viscount Hug was shocked and roared, he didn't see any food at all. Then his face became extremely ugly. Damn it, Ryan knows what I'm going to do. Viscount Hug didn't hesitate at all. He handed this place over to the soldiers under Count Weiss. He was going to rush back now. In any case, several food camps near Weiss territory had to be burned, and then he had to go to Count Weiss to get the Centaur Potion and other magic potion resources, and then hurry back to Yinchuan County. He already felt that Count Weiss could not win. That Ryan was simply a devil. He knew everything they were going to do. Anyway, I have done everything I should do. As for whether there is food here or not, there is food here. I have burned all their food. An army of tens of thousands of people will starve to death in a few days at most. Yes, that's it. I'm going to get what belongs to me. On the other side of the camp, Harrington looked at Viscount Hug's cavalry going away, and couldn't help but envy them. The mobility of the cavalry is good. As long as they carry a little food, they can go wherever they want, and no one can stop them. But we will have it soon. Taking a deep breath, when the fire in the camp was almost extinguished by itself, Harrington drew out the knight's sword. Soldiers! Glory to Ryan, kill him. Chapter 196 The Final War. Of course, no one knew what was happening in the distance. Count Weiss looked at the army that appeared in the rear with crazy eyes. Under such pressure, his army was about to collapse. Why don't you take action? Count Weiss roared at Damon. The legendary knight frowned. He was the extraordinary legion commander of the church, and his status was no worse than any great noble. Count Winter has not appeared yet. I can't take action easily. If I fall into the trap of the space mage, I will die, Damon said, with fear in his eyes. Okay, Count Weiss said 3 good words coldly, and then looked at the tragic battlefield. I must win the war and get the entire Northwind province at all costs. Damon looked at Count Weiss and felt something was wrong. He moved a little away. Then he saw that Count Weiss's body was glowing, and there was lightning flashing on the surface of Count Weiss's body. This is divinity, Damon yelled, and then ran madly into the distance. He was a legend. If he was sensed by divinity, he would become the enemy of divinity in an instant. Divinity has no direct power, but when Count Weiss released the power of divinity on those wild men wearing animal skins, it seemed that the roar of ancient times also came. The roar of a giant alarmed the entire battlefield. On the mobile fortress, Ryan looked at the sky opposite that was obviously wrong. Divinity. He actually mastered divinity. Count Soren stretched his head out in shock, his eyes staring at Count Weiss opposite, and then there was incomparable desire and greed. Yes, only divinity can solidify the door to the other world. Only by mastering divinity can he have the resources of an entire world, Count Soren murmured in shock. The appearance of divinity was really too unexpected. Divinity, that is the origin of the gods. In theory, divinity can replace anything and can do many things that magic cannot do. Divinity can do everything that can be imagined but cannot be done. Ryan was also dizzy from the roar of the wild beast. Indistinctly, he seemed to see a ferocious face looking at him, and then he seemed to see two fangs covered with barbs coming towards him. He was about to be pierced the next moment, but fortunately, all this was an illusion. Ryan came to his senses in the primitive and savage roar, and found that the tens of thousands of soldiers wearing animal skins across the Lion Gorge were roaring wildly from their throats, and then their muscles burst through the animal skins, and their heights were growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a dozen seconds, these soldiers grew to the point comparable to those barbarians. This is divinity. Ryan was shocked. The appearance of these barbarian soldiers was so similar to his own divine blessing. However, his own divine blessing seemed to consume spirituality. Could it be that spirituality is divinity? Ryan didn't understand, and there was no time for him to understand now. Thousands of barbarians who had lost their minds roared like wild beasts. Some of them rushed towards the special forces in the rear, and more barbarians rushed towards Lion Gorge. It was obviously impossible for 10 bridges to accommodate so many barbarians, but at this moment, these barbarians seemed to have no difference in terrain. They rushed directly down the Lion Gorge and appeared in the weed-covered area of the valley in a short time, and then rushed upwards towards this side. If ordinary people were so reckless, they would have fallen and bleed, but these barbarians did not. They were still strong and rushed upwards madly, and were about to rush to the cliff on this side. "Don't let them rush up," Ryan ordered, and 20,000 soldiers of the Central Army had already stood on the edge of Lion Gorge with spears in their hands, looking nervously at the barbarians with bloodshot eyes rushing towards them madly. The stones hit the opponent, at most they only broke some skin. Under the big feet, the steep walls on both sides of Lion Gorge were trampled into stairs. Although they were high above, it was too much of a test of the willpower of these ordinary soldiers. "Kill!" the soldiers shouted to cheer themselves up. They had no way to retreat. But there were too many barbarians. Is this the power of divinity? On the mobile fortress, Ryan took a deep breath and turned to look at Count Soren. "My lord, your army and Count Winter's flying wolf cavalry can't be left. If tens of thousands of barbarians appear on the flat ground and we don't have knights, I'm not sure if these tens of thousands of people can last for 10 minutes, Dragonblood warriors or victory in the war. You choose." Ryan closed his mouth after he finished speaking. It would be bad to say more, but he could clearly feel Count Soren's struggle and hesitation. The Dragonblood warrior corps, the Earl of Solin's family, has accumulated hundreds of years to have such a supernatural corps of thousands of people. This is the biggest trump card of the Earl of Solin's family. Once the loss is heavy, it will seriously affect the dignity and status of Earl of Solin among the great nobles. However, if this war fails, it will be impossible for the earldom to recover in a few decades. Earl Solin stared at the battlefield in front of him. It was obvious that the barbarians who climbed up from Lion Gorge like a siege were crushing their own soldiers. He turned his head and looked at Ryan. "Thundercloud County." Ryan nodded and said, "All the nobles in Thundercloud County funded Earl Weiss, who colluded with the church. Until now, we are not sure whether those nobles knew that Earl Weiss had colluded with the church a long time ago. They need to be tried." After Ryan finished speaking, as if giving Earl Solin a reassurance, he slowly closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the Earl who fought with the army 30 years ago came back. "Kill!" with a roar. It was as if a dragon's roar was singing in the sky, sweeping away the haze of war. Thousands of heavily armored Dragonblood warriors trampled on the muddy ground and moved forward. The soldiers opened a large gap to make way. The big sword, which was almost half the width of an adult's body, fell heavily on the barbarians wearing animal skins. As blood splattered, the white bones were faintly visible, but they were soon drowned by the blood. There were no screams or wails. In the war between the Dragonblood warriors and the barbarians, there was only the dull collision of metal and flesh. The fallen party was no longer qualified to stand up, and the living would face the continuous pressure from the enemy's rear. But after all, there were still some advantages. After all, they were in a high position, and whether it was the Dragonblood Warrior Legion or other ordinary soldiers, they were all wearing defensive equipment. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197: The Final War. Ryan's eyes fell on the barbarians who fell and rolled down the cliff, and then looked at the opposite side of Lion Gorge. There, The Flying Wolf Cavalry Corps also descended from the sky to help the 10,000-man army that crossed Lion Gorge to fight against the barbarians who had lost their minds. Among the three armies divided by Ryan, the strength of the front army was the weakest, but after all, it was 10,000 people. Even Earl Winter did not want to see the end of tens of thousands of people being slaughtered. He could only take action. After the two earls appeared, no matter how many barbarian armies there were, no matter how powerful each one was, they gradually began to be suppressed. At this time, the legendary knight, Damon, the leader of the Holy Heavenly Knights, finally saw an opportunity. I will take action, and they will lose. Damon's tone was full of absolute confidence. As a powerful knight, his existence was a legend. When Damon took action, the magic tower in the sky suddenly appeared again. This was the power of space magicians. They could not show off their magic towers like other magicians, and everyone could see it. The power of space can instantly teleport this magician tower to the battlefield. The sudden arrival of power can catch anyone off guard. However, the Countess is facing a legend after all. Although the space magic is powerful, it is difficult to kill him. Being able to restrict a legend is enough to make the magician famous again. The remaining nearly 500 people of the Holy Heavenly Knights were also bathed in the snow-white holy light at this moment. Wings grew behind their armor, and the war horses under them turned into Pegasus. The great blessing, which had not appeared before, fell on all the Holy Heavenly Knights at the beginning of the war, allowing them to gain all-round enhancement. The most terrifying thing is that they are now not afraid of death. Almost all of their injuries will be restored before they are exhausted. This is why even after the gods disappeared for more than 100 years and the war between the Empire and the Church showed an advantage, the Empire was still the only one in the entire southern land that clearly opposed the Church. The healing skills of the priests of the Church can save the dying, which makes the faith of the Church always hang high. The status of the life magicians of the Empire has gradually become the mainstream. It is also because of this that the Empire needs to have the same means to replace the market of the priests of the Church. More than 400 Holy Heavenly Knights did not fight against a Flying Wolf Cavalry, but rushed to the battlefield on the Lion Gorge. The legendary knight knew very well that the outcome of the war was decided here. Ryan was also very nervous. In his opinion, the threat of these more than 400 Holy Heavenly Knights was stronger than the threat of tens of thousands of barbarians. When the Snow-White Knights and Pegasus leaped down, a large open space was vacated on the battlefield of tens of thousands of people. In the center of the dusty soldiers, the hundreds of knights bathed in the snow-white holy light were so dazzling. Count Soren's dragon blood warriors have retreated to fight against the Holy Heavenly Knights. In front of such an extraordinary legion, only the dragon blood warriors who are also extraordinary legions can fight. Otherwise, let these more than 400 Holy Sea Knights kill all around. And 400 or 500 people can kill the army of tens of thousands of people to collapse and flee helplessly. The Lion Gorge can only be fought by ordinary troops. The barbarians' madness and fearlessness of death make the soldiers retreat step by step. As the dragon blood warriors retreat, some barbarians have already rushed to the high ground. When they are on high ground and have equipment advantages, 3 soldiers can stop the barbarians from rushing up, but when the barbarians kill on the high ground and stand on the flat ground like the soldiers, 10 soldiers can't kill the barbarians. Ryan didn't know whether to sigh at the strength of the barbarians or be shocked by the power of divinity. And you know, once the terrain is not so superior, the threat of the necromancer beside Count Weiss will become the biggest variable in the war. In Ryan's view, the threat of the necromancer is second only to the Holy Heavenly Knights who are now blessed, and all barbarians have to rank behind. The necromancer can form an army by himself. On the contrary, the threat of the legendary knight was not so serious to Ryan, because since the two earls had decided to continue the war, they already had the means to deal with a legend, just like the Thunder Giant. As long as they knew, they had the means to deal with it. As soon as they said what, the sky was filled with a roar of thunder, and the figure of the giant appeared on the battlefield again. Earl Winter and several Sky Knights attacked again, but their faces changed drastically the moment they fought. Damn, love. You gave part of your divinity to the Thunder Giant. It was visible to the naked eye that the Thunder Giant had grown a little taller, and the thunders surrounding him were so dense that people could not find any gaps. He was growing faster. The lifespan of the giants is very long, and it is precisely because of this that their strength improvement is measured in years. But it is also said that divinity can do anything that can be imagined but cannot be done, and helping the giants grow is certainly no problem. Don't wait, Earl Winter shouted in the direction of Earl Weiss, and then his eyes fell on Earl Soren. He stretched out his hand, and Count Soren took out a metal bottle with gloomy eyes. The bottle was filled with liquid. When the bottle was opened, a dragon roar resounded through the sky. Ryan in the distance could feel his heartbeat speeding up at this moment. The power of the dragon heart he had eaten before was being stimulated and stimulated little by little. This dragon heart can be said to be Ryan's future sky seed. The power contained in it can last until the sky night, but it has been suppressed by magic potions. At this moment, it can't help but be active. If Ryan hadn't practiced 3 breathing methods, he might not be able to suppress it at this moment, and the blood vessels in his body would be broken. What is that? He looked over and saw that the metal bottle had fallen from the sky, and all the dragon blood in it was drunk by Count Winter. Only the sanctuary could withstand such power, because it is the essence of all the blood of a giant dragon. This is the trump card in the foundation. If a sanctuary knight swallows dragon blood, not to mention that he will have the power comparable to that of a dragon for a short time, but after it ends, he will faintly touch the threshold of legend. Simply put, it is to give birth to and increase the possibility of becoming a legend. This is the secret of the family of Count Soren. The treasures collected for so many years are to make a legend appear in the family of Soren, but now it has to be used, and because Count Soren is not a sanctuary yet, he is only comparable to the sanctuary by relying on legendary weapons. Therefore, he is not qualified to bear the power of the dragon's blood, otherwise he will explode and die. Don't forget, Count Soren roared in a low voice. If he had a choice, he would rather lend the legendary weapon to Count Winter than give out the only dragon's blood. Don't worry, the noble's promise is eternal, and the honor of the Winter family will not be tarnished on me, Count Winter said. The body of the Thunder Giant is yours, and you also have a large share of the other dimensional world of Count Weiss. Perhaps these still cannot satisfy Count Soren, but they are all that can be given. Count Winter appeared in the sky, facing the violent Thunder Giant, and slowly raised the knight's sword in his hand. Sword of the Mountain King, witness the glory of the mountains. Chapter 198 The Final War. Knight Fighting Skills, between Mountain Kings. This time, the blood and fighting spirit that surged out of Count Winter's body was no longer in the form of a tiger, but a dragon. A blood-colored dragon spread its wings and roared in the sky. Then, the blood-colored dragon swooped down and merged with a heavy sword light, as if tearing the gradually darkening sky apart. This was a power comparable to that of a legend. Even Damon did not dare to bear such a knight fighting skill that condensed all of Count Winter's spirit, blood, and fighting spirit. The huge size of the Thunder Giant also meant that he was destined to be unable to dodge such a sword. When the fighting skill that tore the sky apart came, the roar of the dragon followed. The blood-colored dragon rushed into the chest of the Thunder Giant. The giant, who had 3 hearts to provide huge power, broke 2 of them, and blood was spilt out like money. As the edge of the knight's sword became more and more sharp, a torn wound appeared on the chest of the Thunder Giant. The edge of the wound was densely cracked. As these cracks expanded, the wound became larger and larger. Sizzle. Boom. The thunder was rampant in the sky. The madness brought by the loss of life made the Thunder Giant desperate. The gathered thunder kept falling on the knight armor of Count Winter, and finally penetrated this powerful knight armor. The huge force destroyed the blood in Count Winter's body. If he hadn't taken the blood of the dragon, just these thunders entering his body would have killed him. He held on, but he was blown away by the thunder and fell 1,000 meters away. The Thunder Giant struggled. He stretched out his palm and pressed it on his chest, trying to stop the flow of blood, but the sword was too dazzling, and the remaining sharpness scratched his palm. His vitality was very strong. When his heart was broken by 2/3, he still did not fall down. He knelt on one knee on the ground. The power of thunder seemed to collide with the power left by the knight's fighting skills like threading a needle, and then solidified the flesh and blood in his body, causing the blood to slowly stop. However, the dizziness caused by the disappearance of the heart was inevitable. The vitality of the Thunder Giant was too strong. He did not die, but he could not avoid dizziness and sleep. Perhaps, after dozens or hundreds of years, the Thunder Giant will wake up from his sleep. The big heart represents his recovery from injuries and the heart will grow again. Don't doubt it. This is the vitality of the giant. Their ancestors once fought against the gods. Even if they are completely dead, the giants may revive their consciousness at some point in the future. Their souls are naturally divine. In legends long, long ago, there were even examples of giants being killed again and again and resurrected again and again. This thunder giant may not be unable to do it. After all, the divinity contained in his soul comes from an ancestor who is infinitely close to the gods. But this was in a safe environment. Now it was a battlefield. No one would let a thunder giant fall asleep, especially Count Soren. He thought he didn't have the means of Count-wise to control a giant. The loss of the dragon's blood made him extremely sad. The corpse of the thunder giant might be able to make up for his injured heart. When the giant slowly fell, Count Soren also appeared. The tooth of Lanris in his hand chopped down. The sharpness of the legendary weapon never needed to be worried. The huge head of the thunder giant rolled to the ground like a stone. A pair of eyes gradually lost color. The power contained in the legendary weapon was accelerating the destruction of his vitality. At the position of the eye sockets, the eyes of the thunder giant completely dimmed and gradually turned into liquid that nurtured thunder. From a distance, it was like two pools of spring water flashing. In the whistling wind, Count Soren blocked the attack from a distance. He stared at Count Weiss, who was looking over here, and sneered in his heart. Sure enough, this thunder giant was not as simple as imagined. His birth was abnormal. Count Weiss wanted to take back something, but how could Count Soren allow it? He led 2 Sky Knights to stand on the giant's body. Even though he was dead, the 3 of them could feel the violent blood and energy coming from their feet. The giant has fallen. Ryan retracted his gaze. He was really satisfied watching this battle. Is this the top extraordinary power in this world? It is so powerful that it is unimaginable. The giant has fallen, and Ryan has refocused on the war in front of him. To be honest, the war seems to have nothing to do with him as a commander. The barbarians have gradually climbed to the high ground. Facing an army several times larger than their own, they are also full of vigor. No one can tell whether the barbarians will be killed first or the more than 20,000 soldiers will collapse first. As for the other side, the war between the Dragon Blood Warriors and the Holy Heavenly Knights also let Ryan see another side of this world. The top combat power like the giant and the legend is really desirable, but the fight between the extraordinary legions in front of us makes people excited. The most real collision of flesh and metal between the Holy Heavenly Knights and the Dragon Blood Warriors, every confrontation represents the peak of the Legion War. The most important thing is that these soldiers of the Extraordinary Legion, both physically and mentally, are far beyond ordinary people. Only they can reach the limit of their ideal for war. It's almost time, it's almost time. My Extraordinary Legion will start from this war. Ryan's eyes revealed a light of ambition. After this war, he will gain huge wealth and benefits, and those wealth will eventually become the food for his Extraordinary Legion. Only war can allow him to complete the accumulation of foundation for several years or decades in advance. Why is the Clayton family, which has the shallowest foundation, considered to be the family that can become the 5th Grand Duke of the Empire? It is because of the war that the contemporary Earl Clayton even dared to lead the Flame Dragon Knights to the north to fight with the Mammoth tribe. This is itself a kind of fanatical execution of war. Ryan, who has the blood of Clayton, certainly has no lack of fantasy of war in his heart. He adapts to war faster than anyone else. If it were other nobles, they would probably have been nauseous, fearful and hesitant in excitement. A soldier ran to remind him, and Ryan turned around and saw his flag appear in the army. The rear army has arrived, Ryan laughed. The arrival of his own army meant that the food and grass issue had been successfully completed, and it also meant that the war was about to end. The reinforcements have arrived, and victory belongs to the Empire. He held up a flaming sword, and his loud voice resounded, like a shot of cardiotonic injected into the war. Boom! Where did the warhorse go? When they returned at this moment, they trampled on the battlefield with thousands of troops, knocked the barbarians away with overwhelming force, and fell into the Lion Gorge. Everything seemed to have returned to its original state. They tried to climb up the Lion Gorge again and rush to the high ground, but the barbarians forgot what price they had paid before and how many people died to do it. At this moment, they no longer had enough barbarians, and even the barbarians were not immune to fatigue. The Lion Gorge, which was originally not a threat to the barbarians, now became a grave that they could never climb out of with the arrival of reinforcements at its peak. Kill them all. The barbarians influenced by divinity had no wisdom or reason at all. Even if he wanted to capture them, he couldn't do it. On this battlefield, Ryan could only order them to be killed. Chapter 199 The Final War. Boom. The fire ignited the dark night sky. Ryan liked this era very much, because he could see the stars in the sky when he looked up, and everything was so clear under the bright moonlight. The flames burned the weeds in Lion Gorge, and most of the snakes, rats and poisonous insects had no time to escape and were buried among the bodies of the barbarians. This fire was destined to burn for a long time, and the dark night was brightened. Thousands of soldiers knelt on the ground and prayed in their own language. They asked the Master of Light, the Dawn believed by the Church, to forgive their sins, and prayed that they would not have nightmares in the days and nights to come because of today's killing. There are gods in this world, so faith is inevitable. The important thing is to whom this faith is attributed. The nobles pretended not to see it. If the gods really appeared, all the nobles of the empire would tell the gods that they were more devout believers than the Church. Most people are not adapted to war, so they died on the battlefield. The survivors mourned for them and were glad that they were the lucky ones who could still stand. In front of the flames, these people were no longer afraid or panicked. The dark night would not devour their hearts, even though each of them knew that the new firewood in the flames was the enemy who stood in front of them not long ago, and the partner who stood beside them. In the distance, the necromancer looked at the flames here with frustration and reluctance. If this place belonged to him alone, he was sure that he would be able to touch the threshold of legend and become a legendary necromancer who could walk in the sun. But of course he didn't dare to stay where he was. Following the Count Weiss with disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes, he was already thinking about where to make a living next. Ryan, wearing mithril armor, was still too dazzling. Under the night sky, he slowly passed through thousands of soldiers. These soldiers who knelt on the ground and prayed seemed to be in awe of the ascension of a king. They watched the man with his head held high walk to the edge of the flames, and the scorching flame seemed unable to warm the cold body. Ryan turned his head, and the mark of Rhino Horn Mountain on the knight's sword in his hand shone. We won. Victory belongs to the Empire. Victory belongs to the North Wind. Victory belongs to the Earl. Victory belongs to me. Victory also belongs to each and every one of you. We won the war. We stood in the face of death. Failure cannot fall on our heads. Death cannot make us kneel. Tell me, why are you kneeling? Turning around, Ryan faced the blazing flames that were rising straight into the sky, and slashed with a knight's sword in his hand. The raging fire was split by the sword, and the burning ashes in the fire were twisted like ghosts under the collision of power, but soon turned into ashes. Ryan turned around. Every epic war that is destined to be recorded in history will have a name. Perhaps someone will call this war the Lion Gorge War, but now I tell you that you killed the enemy during the day, and at night, we don't have to be afraid of the ghosts left behind after their death. We killed their bodies under the scorching sun, and we will also turn their souls into ashes under the bright moon. This war is the war of ashes. Ryan's voice resounded under the night sky. Under the silent sky where only the sound of burning flames was transmitted, and above the earth, Ryan's voice pierced everyone's chest like a sharp blade. Gradually, some soldiers stood up. Although they were still praying, there was no fear of the blazing flames in front of them in their eyes. Faintly, Ryan felt that some kind of power fell on him. He looked up, as if he saw the bright moon and the stars were looking at him. In the distance, the returning Earl Soren looked at Ryan as if he was looking at a ghost. Legend, he couldn't believe it, and he didn't want to believe what he saw with his own eyes. No, it's impossible. How can this war make him a legend? Earl Solen's heart was beating wildly, and seeing that the soldiers had dispelled their fear, Ryan stopped preaching and came to Earl Solen. You got the heart of a legend, Earl Solen couldn't help asking. Ryan was surprised, and he didn't understand. What does the Earl mean by this? Earl Solen looked at Ryan with complicated eyes. You should know that becoming a legend is not just a matter of personal strength, right? Ryan nodded, but he only knew that the conditions for becoming a legend were not simply practicing breathing techniques. No matter how powerful the talent was, it was meaningless in front of the threshold of legend, and whoever reached that step was not a genius. The conditions for becoming a legend are very complicated, but a war that is passed down from generation to generation can often give birth to a legend. Earl Solen said that there is no absolute condition for becoming a legend, but the birth of legends can show some methods. Ryan was surprised, and then thought of the Empire. No wonder there haven't been many legends born in the Empire in the past few decades. Those who haven't created a chapter that will be passed down through the ages are not worthy of being called a legend. Legend is not just a realm and a title, but also a mark of an era. This war is not qualified to be passed down through the ages. Just like you said, it is a war comparable to an epic, which is enough to describe it, but I feel the heart of a legend in you. In a war that will be passed down through the ages, someone can pick up the condensation of all spiritual beliefs after the war, That is the heart of legend. Only with the heart of legend can you withstand the power of legend, otherwise it will end in self-immolation. Earl Soren looked at Ryan, and now he couldn't feel the appearance of the heart of legend, as if it was an illusion just now. But Ryan knew that this was not an illusion. He looked at his spiritual panel, and there was a word heart of legend, incomplete, on it. This war is not enough to be called a legend, even if it is an epic, it is of medium and low quality. But Ryan's Ash's speech in the flames and darkness has sublimated this war in a certain way in spirit. Can this thing be given out like a blessing? Ryan was amazed. Count Soren gradually forgot the illusion just now. This war was definitely not legendary. Maybe he just wanted the legend to appear too much? Thinking of this, Count Soren couldn't help but look at the dark sky, where the wizard tower was still glowing, hanging in the night sky like a lantern. The war was over, but the legendary battle was not. The legend of the church is very powerful, Ryan said. He faced the power of Count Winter's entire family alone and was not at a disadvantage. This refreshed his understanding of legends again. Don't worry, he can't win, Count Soren said, and as soon as he finished speaking, Ryan heard a dragon roar covering the night sky. Chapter 200 Frost Dragon. The huge wings covered the stars above like a sea of clouds, and darkness fell, turning into a ferocious dragon staring at Damon. The legendary knight of the church stared at the ice-white dragon in front of him with an ugly face. Frost condensed in the air. The opponent's mere appearance here brought unmelted ice. Since the previous meeting decided to continue the war, Ryan knew that the Earl Winter family had the means to deal with the legendary knight, but he did not expect it to be so simple and crude. How to fight against the legend? Isn't it better to find another legend? There is no way to be more effective than this. The Sanctuary Mage plus the Mage Tower can only be said to be on par with the legend, but the real legend must be on par with the legend. What's more, this is a dragon, a real dragon, not a semi-finished product of the Red Wing Plane, nor other messy bloodlines, but a frost dragon. Earl Clayton's mount, the Amber Dragon, is much worse than this frost dragon. When the frost dragon appeared, the Mage Tower disappeared, and then came a deafening noise, far more terrible than the previous collision between the magician and the legendary knight. Ryan finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this scene. It seems that the Knight Daemon of the church will not be able to help Earl Weiss turn defeat into victory. Maybe he will die. He is not a fool. If he can't beat him, won't he run away? Although the knights of the church are brainless most of the time, as the leader of the legendary knights, they are more like a noble. Earl Soren said this. He knew more about the church than Ryan, who had never been in contact with the church. Sure enough, when the light of dawn came, the legendary knight of the church burst out with a stronger power than at night, and then ran out of the blockade of the frost dragon. Looking at Knight Daemon, who was going to greet the light of dawn, Ryan was sharp-eyed and saw some blood falling. The other party was seriously injured. Coming back to his senses, the words ferocious, majestic, flawless, powerful, etc. popped up in the frost dragon's name, and finally let Ryan see the outline of the dragon clearly. The ice-white body looked like an exquisite gem under the sunlight. If it weren't for the fact that the opponent's legendary strength could not be ignored, Ryan would have wanted to reach out and touch it. Mr. Eris, this is not the same as what we agreed on. Earl Winter came to the side of the frost dragon with a flushed face. He was seriously injured, but the power of the dragon's blood made him look normal. The frost dragon was not very interested in the human who swallowed the dragon's blood in his body. If the dragon was not cold-blooded, perhaps he would have swallowed the dragon hunter at this moment. In its view, taking the dragon's blood is hunting the dragon. In fact, the truth is not too far away. Our deal is that I will help you deal with that legendary knight. The deal does not say that you have to kill him, but you failed to keep him. Earl Winter said that if the leader of the Holy Kingdom Knights of the Holy See could be captured, then this victory would be more important than the war in the southern Thousand Lakes province. In the feast of the struggle between the Empire and the Holy See, Earl Winter also wanted to get a piece of the pie. He is very powerful. The frost dragon stared at the place where the sun shone with deep eyes. It was not very accustomed to warmth. Although the North Wind province was very cold, it was still too warm for it. He has the blessing of the gods in his body, and he can't be kept. The frost dragon shook his head and looked at Earl Winter with his huge dragon head. Our deal ends here, but for the unfinished business in the deal, I will use this ice crystal as a reward. It can help you resist the erosion of the dragon's will once. After saying that, he no longer paid attention to Earl Winter's expression of wanting to ask questions. The huge dragon body spread its wings and soared above the sky, avoiding the sun above its head in the sea of clouds, and flew towards the north. It lives in the north, and the world of winter is heaven to it. This is a lawful neutral dragon that can trade with humans, Ryan thought to himself after seeing this scene from a distance. After all, when it comes to dragons, evil is often greater than lawful. As for dragons that are righteous to humans, there are only a few in the entire history. And living in the north, it seems that it is not too far from the North Wind province. Maybe there will be a chance to contact it in the future. Ryan has a lot of ideas in his heart, but the only thing he can say today is about this war. The war is over, Earl Weiss has lost all his troops, and now it's time for us to reap the harvest. The mobile fortress returned to the hands of Earl Soren. As the outgoing commander, Ryan entered here again as a noble. This time, the number of nobles will be much larger. Even nobles from far away got the news and rushed here day and night. The purpose is self-evident. The war was won, and the next step is the division of benefits. If the nobles themselves are not here, who knows how much benefit they will lose. Of course, they are unwilling to stay in the territory and wait for news. Of course, the mobile fortress could not accommodate so many nobles, so everyone decided to discuss it in the Earl of Weiss's fortress on Thundercloud Mountain. This is certain, but in this process, it is inevitable that the nobles will compromise and confront each other privately. Ryan's feelings are the most obvious, because he holds the decision on the entire war credit. This is the right to speak he got from the two earls, and it also made him a popular noble in the North Wind province. Baron Ryan, this time my army helped kill more than 1,000 enemies, and also assisted the army in clearing the way and transporting food and grass. Such a contribution should not be missed, right, Baron Ryan? The Machado family, the Baron has died when the orcs went south, and the current Baron is a 2-year-old child. Their family's contribution, Baron Ryan, my army suffered heavy casualties. Only 200 of the 2,000 soldiers came back alive, and the dead soldiers were burned. I don't know how to explain to their families, Baron Ryan. Ryan listened to these tireless voices with relish. In the mouths of these nobles, in the war in the North Wind province with a total of no more than 50,000 people, it was blown up to 100,000 on the opposite side and 100,000 on our side. A baron sent 1 or 2,000 soldiers, and the viscount sent 4 or 5,000. Together, there were no more than 100,000. As for why there are only so few people left now, of course, they were burned in Lion Gorge. If they were to identify them now, they might be able to find their knights and squires among the ashes. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.